It's very nice to return to my alma mater. I was a soft money scientist here at the SETI Institute for, I don't know, at least 10 years, I think, before I became a civil servant and eventually moved to Washington, D.C. But yeah, like you, I supported myself by, submitting proposals to Roses for, research grants. So I think I've been here before. Some of you maybe have heard me give the previous incarnation of this talk about our Roses, which is the solicitation for research proposals as opposed to AOs for flight. And so each year I give this, here's the update, what's changed in Roses. This year, in part because I've been educated by Christina Richey, who will speak after me, I'm trying to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that some of the people maybe have never heard of Roses. And so I'm going to try to step back and give not just the delta, but maybe a little bit more information. And then Christina is going to talk more about tips for writing proposals, and we both will be around to answer questions. So I hope that all of this is helpful. Okay, so let me come over here to where the computer is. So yeah, all right. So here's what I will talk about today. Oh, nice. Not sure. See if I can. All right, because now I can wander around. Good. I like that. So basically, this is what I'm going to talk about today. What's new in Roses? And the answer is not a whole lot. We haven't made any radical changes this year. But I'm going to give you some specific examples. I'm going to remind you about some changes that happened in recent years, things that are persisting, just in case you didn't propose last year. Maybe you need a reminder. And then I'm going to talk about some other resources that aren't part of the solicitation, but they're FAQs, things on the web, just little helpful things for proposers that are kind of peripheral to the solicitation. And I'm going to end with just a little bit of personal idiosyncratic advice of my own regarding submitting proposals. So, okay, for those of you who don't know, Roses is our omnibus research solicitation. It's a little different from what you may think of as a normal standalone solicitation, like the one for graduate student research, Finest. There's one call, one due date, one standalone solicitation with its own rules. And then maybe a month later, they put out an AO for some flight project, an instrument or a mission. And it stands alone. One due date, one proposal, Roses, however, is an omnibus. So what this means is that within it, there are many small calls for proposals, each with its own due date, its own topic, its own budget, but they're gathered together under this umbrella. And the notion, at least, is that this makes things a little bit better for you because there's, well, it's not complete consistency, but perhaps a little more consistency than there would be otherwise if these were all separate. So Roses has in the front this thing called the summary of solicitation, and that's got the default rules. So each individual call for proposals can be more science-y, and they can just talk about this is the science that we want, and each individual call doesn't need to repeat the rules. So maybe if you read the rules once, maybe you're pretty much done, with some exceptions that we'll talk about today, but mostly. So that's supposed to be helpful. Because there are 50 or maybe 60 calls each year, each with their own due dates, we have these HTML tables of due dates, tables 2 and 3, and here are the URLs. And For 2018, you would just change this to an 18. And next year, if you change that to a 20, it'll be the same URL. So you can always find it. And table 2 is organized by due date. So you can just, if you're a last minute kind of person, you can just look and see what's coming up next month. But table 3, organized by topic, by appendix number, like A is for earth science, B is for heliophysics, and so on. And so we will look at some examples of this. So this is table 2 of roses for 2019. Well, the top part of it, it goes all the way down into the sub-basement. There are already posted some dates. Some due dates are, January or February of 2020. It's planned that far in advance. But so here we are just in this spring. And there is something very odd this year. Because you'll see that whereas normally I have roses, I had roses 2017 in 2017. And then you get to the end of the calendar year. And I try not to release any new calls in, say, calendar 2018. And then Roses 2018 would come out generally on Valentine's Day. Get it? Roses and Valentine's Day. It's cute. But really, mostly it's because, the president's budget is out by then. And so there's sort of more things that can be released at the beginning without any, getting ahead of that. And so generally the cycle is we release in February, but we try to give 90 days from when a solicitation is released to the due date. And so March, April, May, you wouldn't have any due dates until May. And by then, we hope the prior roses is done with. Sometimes there are ones that stretch out a little bit, like land cover, land use change in earth science. But in general, we have this gap. So roses don't overlap. So of course, this year, because of the partial government shutdown and the decision by our associate administrator that any due date that would have occurred during the shutdown and then was delayed would be at least 60 days after we return to work. So a whole bunch of due dates got pushed off. And the result is that we now have Roses 2018 and 2019 running at the same time. I couldn't figure out how to wait. I thought, well, maybe we could wait and let the others finish. But then the problem was that I had people who were either running programs that happened every year, and they have a regular due date, they have a schedule. And so especially for astrophysics data analysis and the exoplanets research program, they said to me, no, we're done with the text. We gave it to you already. We're waiting. We want to keep our normal due date. People are expecting to submit proposals. We want to do the review and get the new awards in place. If somebody, maybe their old grant is ending, we can't wait. We don't want to have a gap in funding. So now, so we say, OK, we'll add those into Roses 2018, making Roses 2018 go on even longer. But we don't want anyone to miss it. So the thing that we do is at the top of Roses 2019, the first thing we do is we tell you about the things that we added into 2018 late, and we link back to them. And in particular, the Exoplanets Research Program and the Astrophysics Data Analysis Program, those are now solicited twice in 2018. Because generally, they're the first due dates. So there were due dates in spring of 2018. And now here we are, we're in spring of 2019. And so when you follow the link, and you'll see, it'll say, this is the second data analysis. Astrophysics data analysis, or this is the second exoplanets research program, right? So I'm sorry, I'm like really spending a lot of time on this, but I don't want people to miss the calls. So 2018 is still going on. There's still calls in 2018. There were some things like planetary protection research wasn't solicited before in 2018. But they say, oh, well, now 2018 was delayed. Here, let's add that in too. And so you have a series of these. So we link to the 2018 solicitation. I'm very sorry about this confusion. I try to avoid this. But I try to do this in a way that you can't miss it. Yes?
With all due respect, there's something else on that table, which is all of the deadlines for starting at A.40, June 12th, and June 14th, and June 20th. Was there any way to communicate to program managers that perhaps those deadlines could be spread out a little bit?
Yeah, so yeah, we did exchange quite a few emails about this. This happened both in 2019 and also in 2018 as well. Because Thomas, sorry about that. Thomas said, look, when it comes back, even if that due date was, say, in the last week of the shutdown, like let's say that due date, if it were Friday, when they said, oh, we're about to release, we're about to come to an agreement this weekend, we're going to fix it, we're going to reopen the government on Monday. Even if there were a due date on Friday, Thomas had tweeted publicly during the shutdown, it will be 60 days from the end of the shutdown till the next due date. This is my commitment, Thomas saying. It's his commitment to give you enough time to work on your proposals. So that's great, but the problem is that then everybody wants, they say like, well, enough already. The government was only shut down for, whatever it was, 35 days, and that included Christmas, so a month should be good enough. So they don't want to give any more time than they have to. So all the due dates were piling up right exactly 60 days out. And something similar happened here where everybody was asking me, well, when is Rosa's 2019 going to come out? I said, well, I don't really know. We're working as fast as we can. We're trying to catch up. And so, everybody said, well, I'd like mine to be, 90 days after release. And so I did point this out to the division directors, so they were aware that there was some piling up that was going to occur. And I did ask them to deconvolve it. But, ultimately, I think many of them were unwilling to, and I think their attitude was, they said, well, we do exobiology every year. Everybody knows that it's coming. And it's 90 days. It's a lot of time. So, gee, you can start on it early. I think, technically this is correct, but obviously I appreciate that.
Max, some of those calls have almost overlapping deadlines, although in this case completely overlapping deadlines too, because the reviewer piles are strikingly similar, as are the proposers. So, for example, Emerging Worlds and Exoplanets Research Program both have large portions of planetary and distant theory communities. Sorry. Hi, Christina Richey. So some of those programs, like Exoplanets and Emerging Worlds, have a crossover for the communities that they have proposing. And there's strong discouragement in submitting multiple proposals. And so one of the ways for program officers to be able to control that, and I'm not a program officer anymore, so I can say these things, but one of the ways to control that was to put the deadlines close to each other, so you basically had to choose. I don't think fully that program officers were reflecting on what that does to AORs of organizations, and maybe that should be a conversation that you have in your giant monthly tag-up about what exactly we're doing to AORs when we put all of our deadlines on top of each other like this, because it's pretty brutal for them.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Okay, I have to say, I thought that's interesting. I was actually unaware. I thought it was merely disregard. I didn't realize that it was actually a deliberate decision.
Yes.
I wonder if that's even wise for the program officers, who then have to put together their review panels at the same time and then are competing for reviewers. So
we can compete using the other calls proposers for the reviewers of the other call.
oh, that's clever. I guess, okay, all right. So you go in and say, oh, who proposed to exobiology? I'll invite them to come serve on Emerging Worlds or something like that. Okay, all right, yes, those are the secrets. So, okay, well, I have to say I was not aware of that. And okay, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, we have a question from the audience.
So Max,
Do you need a?
as a writer to that, I can totally see how you'd be thinking about proposers and review panels when you're thinking about that. But specifically to support Debbie, right? Even though you might think that people that apply to development of advancement of lunar instrumentation programs and people who apply to exobiology might be completely different people, and that's probably true. But in an organization like ours, all of them go through
The AOR is the same, even if the proposers are different.
So I wanted to
Right.
highlight that as an issue.
All right. Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, I am sorry about that, and I think that I hope that we are generally better about this, and that it's perhaps worse this year because roses came out a little bit later. I thank you for this. I was not paying enough attention, and I think in future I will be more aggressive with the program officers and the division directors about spreading things out. And also, the division director in planetary science in particular is new, and the division director in earth science, he just retired, and there's an acting division director. So I think that may have also added to it as well. The RNA lead in heliophysics just changed, and so there's a lot of turnover. So I think the combination of the turnover in leadership and the shutdown probably made it worse this year. So I am sorry about that. Now that I'm aware of it, I will make more of an effort in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for telling me this. I can't, and I can't believe no one, yeah. I mean, not that it would have made any difference, but this is actually the first time I'm, okay. Yes, so organized by due date. There are different flavors, normal notices of intent, mandatory step 1 proposals. We're going to talk about these all explicitly. There are a couple slides here in this talk that I've included just because later you can refer to them because you have a copy of the talk now. And so I'm not going to belabor this, but there's some useful things here, some of which I will mention again later, like the RSS feed, for keeping track of changes to roses afterwards and amendments and stuff like that. So anyway, what I thought I would do is maybe just quickly step through the different appendices, so the different divisions within science, and just talk about the new program elements. And in earth science in particular, this allows me to illustrate a couple things. So there are a couple PACE mission related calls. One of which was actually released as part of 2018, and one is in 2019. And so those are cases where the text is final on release. So we say, hey, here's a new call this year. Here's the text. Please read it. Here's the due date. It's all out there. And then you have other cases where they know that there's going to be this JEDI science team call, but the text isn't finalized yet. Because, I don't know, they're waiting on input from somebody, but they wanted to get the word out. And there's an ISRO call like that where they have a notice. They say, hey, we're planning on doing this thing with ISRO. We want to let you know about it in advance. So you can maybe start thinking about it, start talking with your friends about teaming. But we haven't released the final text yet. And the due date will be 90 days at least from when we release the text. So they say, hey, we're going to do this, but we don't have the details yet. And then there are other cases, like this geostationary satellite systems call, where they say, we may solicit this, so we want you to know, but they're kind of a little cagey. They're hedging their bets. They're saying, hey, we're not promising we're going to solicit this, but we may solicit this. And in this case, I don't know, they may be waiting on something having to do with a budget, like an operating plan change or a passback or something like Of course, these things are all complicated by the fact that, I mean, they want us to distribute the money quickly, so we solicit now for next fiscal year. So there's always some uncertainty, right? And then finally, just because I think it's cool, and it illustrates things that are only solicited occasionally, there used to be years ago, for a few years, they had this space archaeology call. It's less cool than it sounds, actually, because it's really not the archaeology of ancient civilizations in space. It's merely Earth archaeology, actually, as seen from orbit. But still, it's pretty cool. And that's returned after quite a few years away as part of this interdisciplinary call in Earth science. And this is one of these calls that's only offered every few years. So it's common, you'll see if you look at Table 3 of ROSES, which is organized by topic, you'll see Earth science has the most calls, like 50. And many of them say not solicited this year. But if you go ahead and you look at it, there will be a little brief description. And it will say, hey, this was last solicited in 2018. We'll solicit again in 2021 or whatever. So they give you an indication. So everything sits in the table every year. So if you're new to ROSES and you're looking the first time, oh, this looks like a cool call. Oh, it's not solicited this year. You know, why are they toying with me this way? No, it's not meant to be cruel. They want you to know, hey, we do this every other year, every third year, and that gives people an opportunity to prepare in advance. So, okay, that allowed me to illustrate a couple things. Oh, and this is now a slide that says that what I pretty much just said. They all have their own cadence, and there will be a bold notice at the top. So the indication of whether something is solicited or not, or when, is not just in the due dates in the table, but also if you go to the call and you look at it, there will be a bold notice at the top that'll say, hey, this is the deal with this one. And sometimes we do add program elements later in the year. Obviously, they're the ones that maybe we warned you about in advance, like JEDI, but there are others where maybe there was no indication at all. Like we were just talking a moment ago, Natalie and I, about, well, oh, in the wake of, in the sunset of the Astrobiology Institute, will there be implications for ROSES? I don't know. No one's told me. But maybe what will happen is when I return to headquarters next week, somebody will come to me and say, oh, by the way, here's a new call that we're adding to Appendix C because of this change that was made. And so that would, both for you as well as for me, just sort of appear out of the blue. And so we're going to talk about how to keep on top of this because I don't want you to miss anything. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. In heliophysics, the Space Weather Science Applications Operations to Research call is new. There was an Operations to Research call before, but this is a little bit different, this applications call. When we released ROSES, this is one of those ones that said, hey, we're going to do this, it's TBD. And then Amendment 1 was we released the final text and the due dates. That's now out there. There was, for a few years, this H-TIDES call that was sort of hybrid. It had these smaller research proposals that were solicited, but also instruments for flight, CubeSats, the so-called LCAS, low-cost access to space. And so what they've done is they pulled out the flight opportunities that were really quite different. And now that's a separate program element in Appendix C. HFORT, that's a nice acronym. As you know, we love our acronyms. Be aware that especially in Appendix B, but also in Appendix C and a little bit also in astrophysics and earth science as well, there's this requirement for the Step 1 proposal. I'm going to emphasize this again a little bit later, but you definitely don't want to miss it, especially in the case of heliophysics. So the rules vary, and especially in the case of heliophysics, one really wants to pay attention to it, because the rule in heliophysics tends to be that they want you have to have your team in place. You have to have your team together at the time of the Step 1 proposal. And so you may not have an opportunity to add a co-investigator later, for example. So read the call carefully. Planetary science, there are a few new calls. There's the so-called Lunatech program. Bepi Colombo, participating scientists. The early career program in planetary science, which was released as draft for community comment in Rose's 2018, and now that's final in 2019. And KPLO, participating scientist program, which was actually released as part of 2018. It was one of those ones that came out late in 2018. But that's coming right up. I've lost track of the date, but that must be around now. That's today. Oh, okay, good. This is very timely. So yes, get in your step one proposals. These step ones in planetary science are essential. It's just a sentence or two. It's essentially just a notice of intent. The team can change later if it has to. So if you think you might want to propose to KPLO, participating scientist, please get that in. Yes. Yeah, I think so. C22. I think this is out, or is this a TBD now? I'd have to check.
I believe it came out already.
I think it's out. I think it came out with Rose's 2019.
So we're basically applying to ask NASA to support a collaboration with ESA.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
That's a little different, right?
Right. Okay. Thank you for asking. If you couldn't hear that, so this is a reference to an ESA mission, but we do sometimes have these solicitations where we appreciate that there are U.S. maybe they're already participating essentially for free, or there's somebody in the U.S. who really, they have a contribution to make, but like people at the SETI Institute, you're like, hey, we're not like university folks who are covered 9 months. It's like, if I'm going to spend time on this, I need some money. So this gives an opportunity for people at U.S. organizations to propose to work on a European, or for that matter, a Korean mission. Right? So that's the idea. Okay. Thank you for asking me about that. And in astrophysics, again, I made reference to this fact. Astrophysics was, it's not solicited in 2019, but it was solicited a second time in 2018. The schedule was the same as it was last year. So that's not a surprise. And it's explicitly called the second astrophysics data analysis program. Okay. I should make a note of that. Okay, so the final text isn't out yet. It's a TBD. So that should say it will be. Oh, that's wrong.
But the good news is the text is up there along with the point of contact at NASA headquarters with Shoshana Widener. So you're able to contact the program officer and at least start questions if you have them.
Thank you. And we can actually, before I leave today, I'll fix that, so at least your version will be correct. I have to try to remember to fix that for future talks. So, okay, let's talk about NOIs versus step one proposals. So again, this is our friend, the table of due dates, and so if nothing is said, if just a date appears here in this penultimate column, then, like for any A25, the SMAP science team, say, well, this is a notice of intent. Oh, thank you very much. And so this is appreciated, but not mandatory. And then this is when proposals are due. And this is, again, if it says nothing, it's a notice of intent. And a notice of intent may be submitted by an individual. So you can be at home, in your pajamas, your feet are up, and you just submit that notice of intent into NSPIRES as an individual. As opposed to a proposal that has to be submitted by the AOR of your organization. And she is going to want to know, in the case of a real proposal, she's going to want it however long in advance, and that you have a budget, and so on and so forth, right? So notices of intent are easy. When it says that the notice of intent is mandatory, and it will say so explicitly, both here and in the bold notice at the top of the PDF, which is the call for proposals, that short thing that's just a few pages long, says this is what we actually want in our proposal. It'll say explicitly, both here and there, hey, this is mandatory. in which case it's still a notice of intent. So it may still be submitted by an individual, not an organization. So you can still do it from home in your pajamas. But you absolutely have to get that in by the due date. If you don't, then you're going to be in trouble later when you try to submit that proposal, and they say, no, we won't take it. A notice of intent was required. And we'll talk about the whys, but basically, the notion is that the notice of intent is easier for the proposers. And so they say, well, we'll just call a notice of intent, and then your organization, that maybe takes a little bit of the workload off of Debbie, so that's nice. But the thing to be aware of here is that unlike a step 1 proposal, which I will discuss next, where the NSPIRE system enforces the rule that you must have submitted it beforehand. In the case of a notice of intent, this is not baked into the software rules because the system is old and they haven't fixed this yet, but they're going to fix it, they assure me. But what this means now is that you can submit a proposal without having previously submitted a notice of intent. Notice my choice of words. You may not, but you can. Which is awful if that actually happens, because then you've submitted the proposal. It's like, oh, crap, because then they come back to you and say, no, we won't take it. So do please pay attention to that. You can't make that mistake with a step 1 proposal, because if you haven't submitted that step 1 proposal, pardon me, if Debbie, the AOR, hasn't submitted the step 1 proposal, then you cannot submit a step 2. So no worries, you won't find yourself in that situation where you accidentally, submitted it without the precursor, because you cannot do that. But it means more work for Debbie. But no budget is required for the step 1. It's really, in general, it's just a sentence or two. Hey, this is what I'm planning on doing. I'm working with so-and-so. So it's easy. So we hope that doesn't require too much work for you. You just, submit it. Debbie doesn't even need to look at it, maybe. It depends. Now, you do really want to read what it says in the program element about what's required for that step 1 proposal. I have already alluded to the fact that in heliophysics, they are more strict about changes in the team. And there are cases where the step 1 proposal is not just a sentence or two. It's actually an honest-to-goodness proposal. That was the case last year for the severe applied sciences team in earth science, and also, I believe, the heliophysics early career program, where those step 1 proposals were actually 3 or 5 pages long, and they did a review, and only those who were invited to submit a step 2 were able to later. So there are cases where these step 1 proposals are real proposals. Like I said, like in the case of the severe applied sciences team, that's an example from earth science. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. In the case when it's a notice of intent, in general, it's not even required. It's merely encouraged. So sure, you don't have to submit it at all. So you definitely can change for a notice of intent. So yes, do, as always, read the call. There are some changes to the summary of solicitation, which, as I said, is that part in the front that says these are the default rules. So it's just sort of the blah, blah. There's no big changes this year. It's sort of relatively small stuff. And there's actually not a clock. But so I don't know how long. I feel like I'm taking a little longer than I usually do. So I think I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. But Yeah, there's no big changes this year like, oh, like a few years ago we did this thing where we said, oh, you have to redact the salary fringe and overhead, and it was a really big change to our process. There aren't big changes to the process this year. Okay. So, yes. So, there are, as I said, there are changes to Roses after it's released. Some cases, entirely new program elements are added. So I want to illustrate a couple of these. So what happens is when you just glance at the tables of due dates, so your first indication that something has changed is you will see something is bold and red. So in this case, you can see just that due date has changed. And so what that means is for the Aura Science team, they delayed the due date, but that's it. They didn't change the text. But I mean, you would click through that. The title is a hypertext link. It takes you to the page. You would read the call, but you'll see that all that's changed is the due date. However, down here, I mentioned this, when on release, the Space Weather Applications Operations to Research call was just, it was a TBD. And so in this case, the whole thing is bold and red because everything's changed. Final text was released. The due dates were given. And so that's your indication that something has changed here. So that's one thing. If you have this bookmarked and you look at it, it is much longer than is implied by this slide. Oh, here we go. Yes, final text was released in early April. But there are a couple other ways that we tell you when things have changed. So one is through the emails and the NSPIRES mailing lists, which if you go and you log into NSPIRES and you, you click on account management, and then you can sign up for these different mailing lists. There's the general subscription list, all amendments to Roses, and for that matter, the Salmon AO and Discovery AO and all those things. They all go to the general, anything important goes to the general subscription list. But there are also lists for each one of the divisions. And those tend to be for smaller things. Hey, the point of contact for this program has changed, stuff like that. Or there's a little clarification. Hey, we posted an FAQ for this call. Stuff that's maybe not essential, but nice to know. So I do encourage you to subscribe to those. If you are on NSPIRES, you can download a PDF of all the amendments so far this year and the clarifications, corrections to Roses. So you have to go and you have to click on it and look at the PDF file and go through it. It'll be in chronological order. If you want to just sort of see them at a glance, what may be maybe easier for you is if you subscribe to this RSS feed, then you can just click on it and this menu pops down. And what you can see here is, oh, maybe this is a laser pointer. Oh, look at that. It is. So you lay your mouse here, and then it pops down this menu. And then you may see here that some of them show an orange box. I have not clicked on that yet. I haven't viewed it. But this one here on the top, I've viewed that. And, here's the due date deferral for the Aura Science team, which I mentioned earlier. And then if I click on it, then this is the page that I see. So this is just, I quickly look at that, and I see, oh, that's Earth Science. OK, I better look at that one. So say, oh, I'm an Earth scientist. But maybe there's another one. D means astrophysics. Like, I don't care about astrophysics. So, see, this way you get a quick look. You can click on the ones you care about, and then you can read the text and see what it says. And it'll say, hey, this is what this call is about, blah, blah. And then this is the change. And so that's one way to keep track of these things. And I was in the astrophysics branch, so that's why I'm joking about not caring about astrophysics. Yes, a question.
Is there a point at which, 2 weeks before the deadline, you won't do amendments?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not going to. Yes, thank you for asking. It was about the timing of when we would do changes. Our basic rule is if we do an amendment, that's a big change. That's like a change in scope. And so if we change the scope, then we should reset the due date out 90 days. So, and in general, we try not to make any changes right before the due date. But if we did make such a change, it would be a change that is, in essence, unimportant. Like, you know, if we change the point of contact for the program, maybe that doesn't really matter. You are welcome. Okay, so on the SARA webpage, as opposed to the NSPIRE's webpage, which is where proposals are submitted and where one reads the call, the SARA webpage, which is this additional page that I made with sort of extra stuff. When I came to headquarters and I became SARA, which is this brand sort of, I created this webpage with things that I thought would be useful to have. And if you follow the link to the library, there's instructions here for how to subscribe to the Google due date calendars. Again, not essential, but just another way that you can keep track of where the due dates are. So if you use the Google Calendar, then it appears, and so you can say, oh, I'm interested in, you know, astrophysics or heliophysics or whatever, and then you add those into your calendar, and then they'll appear. And then, at least in theory, you know, if we change the due date for the Aura Science team, the contractors will they'll change those, so they'll change automatically in your calendar. At least in theory, that's how that works. If you click here, you may volunteer to serve on review panels. And I always encourage people to do this for two reasons. The first is selfish. It's very challenging to put together a review panel of qualified, not conflicted peer reviewers. So it's helpful to the program officers. However, there are these super secret ulterior motives that I have for this. One is that I think the more people who subscribe, then the more I have maybe new people of whom the program officers are not aware, who now are volunteering and get added onto the review panel. And so there's some new thought, and perhaps, you know, the volunteers are younger and more representative of the community. So this is all a good thing. And finally, it's good as a proposer to see the review process. The joke is, people ask, will I learn how to write a proposal? And the joke is, no, you will not learn how to write a proposal. You will learn how to not write a proposal, right? That's the joke. It really is helpful. Anybody can tell you who served on a review panel, it definitely improves one's proposals. So I encourage you to do that. I update this, I think, once a quarter or so. So there's a bunch of different programs here, and then these are hypertext links, and you click on one of these, and then it takes you to a page where you're asked to identify yourself, and then there's a bunch of topics or instruments or, you know, focus areas, methodologies, you know, whatever. And so you check the boxes, and you click submit, and it all goes into a spreadsheet. And then I provide that spreadsheet to the program scientist who runs that program, and then they sort by topic and say, oh, I really need somebody who is, you know, familiar with LADI data or whatever it is. This is very useful to the program officers. Let me add, just incidentally, a lot of people do volunteer. Some of those people are excluded because maybe there's a lot of proposals from your organization. So even though you didn't propose, there's enough just organizational conflict of interest, so-called conflict of interest, that the program officer decides not to use you. Or there's a whole bunch of geophysicists have volunteered that year for some reason. They're like, enough with the geophysicists. And, you know, what I really need is this over here. And so there are always more people who volunteer than panelists. So sometimes you get called right up, sometimes you don't. Do please volunteer. Yeah, all right. And so now we're just sort of a quick reminder of a couple things that continue in case somehow you were not aware of them. We are redacting budgets, and I can talk more about this in detail, but I know your folks here are very familiar with this. Basically, we're just not including salary, fringe, and overhead in the proposal. It's peer reviewed. We are still subject to the PRC restrictions. All of NASA is. So those rules are still in place. Again, I can talk more about that if you like. Manuscript versions of published peer-reviewed papers have to be archived in PubMed Central. I think they call it NASA PubSpace or something like that. It's NIH PubMed Central. And those will be made public 1 year after publication. Data management plans are required with most proposals, basically except for instrument development, where it's not anticipated that there's going to be any data generated. So those are continuations. There's, and then, oh, yes, question.
I was just going to ask if the PubMed Central is similar to ORCID?
Oh, so I believe, so I don't know if this has been implemented or not, but I think the plan was that one could log in with, you could log in with your ORCID, and then it knows who you are, and then you say, here's my manuscript, and they say, great, I already know who you are, I already know all your information. So I think that's supposed to make it easier. And similarly, NASA civil servants, I believe, I don't know if it's true yet, but they were saying in the Brave New World that a NASA civil servant would be able to log in with their badge and their chip, and it would know who they are. So that's supposed to be, I don't know if, I haven't done it. When I tested it, at the time, the ORCID wasn't. But I don't know if Ross, do you know, have they implemented that yet?
Yeah, you can log in with your ORCID ID, but the ORCID system is different from PubSpace.
Okay.
Those are, they serve different functions.
Okay, so they don't communicate between each other, so if you put it in one, it goes to the other? Or?
Well, an ORCID ID is an identifier that a researcher can have. And when you go to the PubMed Central System or PubSpace to deposit your manuscript, they would love to have your ORCID ID with that so they can help keep that link. But PubMed Central is a place for storing manuscripts, right? ORCID is a place for identifying researchers.
Thank you.
Right, so they're tapping into it. Yes, Mark.
Just add personal experience. This must be new this year.
The ORCID thing?
The PubMed, whatever.
I think I tested it at least, maybe it was over a year ago now. But anyway, yeah, it's relatively new.
Because it was painful for someone. I did not know how to, I could not figure out how to use it, except for the fact that I have a NASA ID and a NASA dongle. But I only have that because I asked for it and because I have connections over at NASA.
Right.
People even at the Institute don't have that. And I just found it a baffling system.
I'm sorry it was baffling, and I guess my experience was similar to yours. Maybe it was too easy for me because I was able to log in as a NASA civil servant. So I guess maybe it's more difficult for people who aren't. Happily, here at the SETI Institute, you have Dr. Ross Beyer, who's an expert, so he will answer all of your questions. I'm joking.
When I've given a presentation with Gerald from the
Steeman, yeah.
a couple of times at LPSC and DPS, and the resounding thing that we've gotten from people that have tried the system is that it is confusing, and the process, regardless of your ability to log in, just like, what's step one and it confuses people, and that seems to still be a thing that's problematic.
Okay, so what I'm taking away from this then is that we need a step-by-step walkthrough for the submission of manuscripts. I have to say, I made the mistake. I wasn't really paying a lot of attention, and I thought, well, gosh, NIH has been doing this for years. They must have really excellent instructions. And I guess the answer is no, they don't. And so I think I'm going to have to do my thing.
Also be how the NASA part is implemented, right? So maybe that you need to change some user interface elements
Right.
I'm not sure, but there's certainly a problem in that.
Gosh, because I mean, it should just be, you go in. So, okay, so what I'm taking away from this, so clearly, is that or somebody needs to go through, do screen captures, do a step-by-step walkthrough. And there needs to be a, hey, if you're a grantee at a U.S. institution, go here. If you're a NASA civil servant, go here. That kind of a thing. All right, so this is good for me to know. That this is something that either I or the Office of the Chief Scientist or somebody, we need to do a walkthrough for this. Okay, all right.
This is outside your scope, but the other thing that was very mysterious to me is that you finally go through this very baffling process, and it says, you will be informed when your article has been, I don't know, accepted or something like that. And then it's like 3 weeks go by.
Yeah.
And then something happens somewhere magically off in space.
Right,
We have
right.
no idea what it was.
That's right,
And
yeah.
then you go back in and they say, okay, does this look okay?
Right.
And then you click a couple of boxes and say yes, and then you're done.
Right, and there's a reason,
That mystery.
right, and there's a reason for this two-step process because, so basically, what they want you to come in and upload your manuscript, which could be in a few different formats, but what they're going to do is they're going to convert it to XML, and they're worried especially about like tables, things that might get messed up, and so what they want you to do then is to go back in just so they can ask you like, hey, does this look right? Did we get it right here? So that's really what that's for, So that's why there's that.
That had been explained, that would have been nice too.
Yeah, God, okay, so I haven't been paying attention to this clearly, you can tell. Yeah, so why does it take any time at all? I mean, it seems to me it ought to just, here, just do it like that. So I don't know why, I don't know what causes that delay. And again, NIH is way bigger, has way more grantees than NASA. So, I just figured, oh, well, they'll have this all figured out, So, all right, that's on my list of things to do.
I actually still have a question to slide back. So the last item there was about data management plans, and they've been required for some elements for a few years now.
Right, right.
When will they be taken into account as decisional for scores?
Ah, right. Thank you for asking the question. So although the data management plans are required in general, they are not part of the merit score. They don't affect whether or not the proposal is selectable. With a few exceptions, if one submits a proposal to Planetary Data Archiving and Tools that's about making this higher order data product that is not currently available, making it available, that's sort of the whole purpose of the proposals. That's an exception. And it doesn't even have a separate data management plan. It's just the proposals. That's part of the grade. But in general, it's not part of the grade. What may happen is, though, if so we have the peer reviewers look at the data management plan, and the peer reviewers may say, hey, this is great, or, this really isn't good enough. If we love this proposal, we love this data set. It's not enough that they're going to post this on this server in their garage. Literally, when I lived in Mountain View, I lived with a Unix system administrator, and we had a server in a garage. No, it's not good enough. We want this in the planetary data system, right? We want this to be, that's our gold standard. Okay, so then what'll happen is the program officer may say, look, you got an excellent score for merit, want to fund this proposal, but here's the thing, you have to do this. So the award may be conditional on doing or not doing something associated with data management, but it doesn't change the grade. And that's the agency standard in response to this OSTP memo. And that's just sort of where we are. And I'm not aware that this is going to change soon, except for those particular programs that say, hey, this is important to us.
So my my concern is that the situation that you just outlined is the ideal situation, but what I'm afraid is that the program officer says, we got some bad comments about your data management plan. Could you please change this? And then whether they do or not, but there's not enough of a stick. And I've seen some real stinker data management plans, and I think we're losing data.
Oh,
And so I'm curious whether the scenario that you outlined, which is, I'm not going to fund you unless you fix this, is really what's happening, or if it's, we got these comments, think about it, I'm funding you anyway because you scored high on the merit, here's your money, but...
I suppose, yeah, you know, that it may be a little leaky, the scenario that you describe, where, you know, perhaps the program officer, I suppose it depends on the nature of the comments from the panel. What's supposed to happen if the panel says, oh, no, this data really, this needs to be in PDS, then, yeah, my understanding is that the program officer is supposed to enforce that. Whereas, you know, if the panel says, well, you know, it kind of depends, you know, this seems like this would be nice to have, but, you know, so maybe it depends on, I think it should depend on the instructions from the panel to the program officer, not instructions, but the indication from the panel of how important the data is to them. So what's actually I don't know.
Me neither. So
okay.
that answers my question to the extent that you can.
So I'm just going to sort of, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on redaction. I'm just going to flip through this. The slides are in here. I did screen captures. There's a whole FAQ on this. Yeah, so the bottom line is the proposals include the cost of things, but not salary, fringe, and overhead. The peer reviewers see, but everything goes into the total budget, which is separately implemented. What the proposers, what the peer reviewers see is they see the summary table of work effort. So they see how much time is being devoted, either funded or not. And so they look at that and they say, oh, does it seem reasonable? Okay, you know, the PI is working 3 months a year, but look, you know, they've got this, you know, full-time graduate student and, you know, so on and so forth. So that's the assessment that they're making. But the costs of things are in the proposals. So I think the example that I give is, say, hey, my co-I, Dr. West, wants a 4000 C oscilloscope, $3,500. Well, does West really need a $3,500 oscilloscope? Because you can get an oscilloscope for 1/10 that price. Well, it depends. You know, what does she need it for? You know, maybe she does need the $3,500 version. So, okay, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. I get questions sometimes about, oh, the guidebook says this, but Rose's says that. I do have a little section on order of precedence. But basically, the guidebook is an agency document. It's the default if everything else is silent on something. Similarly, Rose's, if the program element is silent on this thing, then the default rules in Rose's apply. But if the call for proposals, that very short, you know, just a few page long document, what that thing says, that takes precedence. That supersedes the others. So I do want to mention, again, this is sort of in that category of if you're proposing something new or if you're new to Rose's, we do, for prior years, post a PDF of the winners from that year. The name of the PI, their organization, the title, the abstract, so you can see who's won in past years, what kinds of topics. That's if you know that you're interested in Earth's surface interior, you follow the link. So here you're at the ESI page on NSPIRES. And so that's a PDF of just the winners for ESI for last year. But if you go, for example, to the NSSC grant status page, and you can do a search, and there's date ranges and words and title or the PI name or organization or whatever, and then you can see everybody who's ever gotten a grant about, you know, I don't know, whatever, black holes since, you know, forever. This is just for external awards. This is a government requirement to have this database for grants and contracts. not for internal awards. Since, as far as I'm concerned, all proposers are just proposers and they're scientists, all of the abstracts appear here. So if somebody proposes from a NASA center, they appear here, but unfortunately they don't appear here. The NSSE is unaware of internal awards, awards internal to NASA. And so I just wanted to close, again with apologies, I'm probably over time, just a little bit of idiosyncratic advice for reviewers, and then I think this sort of will make the transition to Christina's. She's going to tell you more good advice about how to submit proposals. These are just sort of, but number one, like, do not annoy the reviewer. Sometimes people say to me, oh, well, technically you say that the font size in the figure can be smaller, so is it okay? But yeah, but just remember, rule number one, don't annoy the reviewer. Yes, right, the proposal, it's not enough that a proposal can be understood. Try to write a proposal that cannot be misunderstood. Definitely use figures and tables. It really is true what they say. Figure says 2,000 words, whatever. I do strongly encourage you to have your proposal reviewed by others prior to submitting it. And make changes. You don't have to do what they tell you to do, but do something. Right? That's an indication. They're saying, like, oh, I didn't like this, you should say, and then they tell you something incredibly stupid. No, okay, you don't have to do that, but that's an indication there's something wrong with that section, right? And ditto for the reviews that you receive from NASA. And on that topic, I would say, so, okay, you got your reviews back from NASA, and like you now have proof that the reviewers are morons. Okay, you're going to take that review and you're going to set it aside. You're going to put it in your desk drawer and go home, have a whatever glass of wine or soda or something. Come back tomorrow or the next day after you've cooled off a little bit. Really read it and again, see what they said, and as with your friends, like, okay, they're wrong, but they had a problem with something. That's an indication to you that that thing needs to be fixed. Even if they're totally wrong about what they thought X and they're totally wrong about X. Okay, what do you need to do so that even a moron could see that your idea is excellent, right? That's your goal. Oh yeah, I Christina will talk more about this. Do be careful about how you talk about your reviewers on social media. That, you don't talk about your reviewers. Yeah, don't. It is a sad truth. And the Vox Populi, Vox Dei, the word of the people is the word of truth or God or whatever. I guess what I'm saying here is, this is the process. There are a few panelists read your proposal. There's some external reviewers who read the proposal. And what we tend to see often is the same things come up again and again in these reviews. And then, the proposer will say, oh, no, the grade is wrong, and they're not right about it. And you have the sense like, well, it's like democracy. It's like, okay, the result may not always be right, but, if I see multiple reviewers are saying the same thing, wow, you really have to take that seriously. And often I'll do a debrief with somebody. I'll say, gee, have you considered that, maybe the problem here is really with the proposal. Maybe you weren't as clear as you thought you were, right? Yeah. There are some sad truths. It really is true. People will say, oh, they're asking me for more detail about this, but I've already filled my 15 pages. I'm going to have to cut something. It's true. It really is this sort of impossibility that you're going to have to figure that out. And sometimes the answer may be, a more focused proposal. I don't know. So, and sometimes things are worth saying more than once. I think the last time I got a proposal funded, shortly before I left here. I think the only weakness that I had, the panel complained that the proposal was repetitive. Gee, I wonder why. Sometimes, though, rather than being repetitive, with structure, underline, bold, a box around sometimes there are ways that you can emphasize something with the layout. So, and again, I'm just going to end with an appeal to please serve as a reviewer. Thank you for your patience. Again, I'm sorry, I think I've gone over time. This took a little longer than I thought, but I added a little bit this year. Christina has got all kinds of good advice. I'm going to be around this afternoon as well to answer, so there's going to be lots of time to answer questions and stuff like that. But if you have a question right now. Are you sure? Yeah. It's, okay, all right. Well, thank you again very much for being so patient with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christina Richey. I was at NASA headquarters for 5 years as a program officer, primarily in the Planetary Science Division. But I also worked with Max, who is the lead for research for SMD. And I started about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, teaching proposal writing workshops. Michael New, who's currently the Deputy Associate Administrator for Research, and Kurt Niebuhr originally created the workshops, but they both became far too busy to be able to give the workshops, and I wanted to take them over and reinvent them. I left headquarters last year and started at Jet Propulsion Laboratory and submitted a proposal to do the proposal writing workshops. So you want to talk about an intimidating activity, try proposing to teach people how to propose. It was funded, yay, reviewed well. And I've been giving these workshops since through Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I've been working with our Innovation Foundry, which is our proposal office, to really work on kind of revamping this a little bit and making it more of an active environment. So we will have the opportunity to kind of, you know, go through several things today. So there's going to be a little bit of activities. This is only the 2-hour version. This can be 4 to 5 hours. But the 2-hour version does not have nearly as many activities. And there are some slides today that I will skim through quickly. You will have copies of the slides afterwards so that you're able to read them in more detail. All right? So here's what the normal agenda looks like for the 4-hour version of this. We're going to skip activities 1, 2, and 3, and stories 1, 2, and 3. But we're going to make sure we get our last activity in at the end of the day, because I think it's a really great way to end on a strong note when we do these workshops. So let's start off by talking about the process. And this is hard to do because you all have food in your hands. But, and note, I'm looking at you. I want you all to close your eyes. I want you to think about your research. What does it look like? Does it bring you joy? That's right, I just Maria Kondo'd you. But seriously, think about the parts of your research that you enjoy the most. Think about the things that are part of that science that you enjoy the most. Now go ahead and open up your eyes and realize that that is the research we are talking about today. I want you to take the thing that you actually love doing and make that work in this process. Don't find a program and desperately put whatever you can towards it, because you're not putting your passion behind that moment. So find the things that you're passionate about and define your research topic that way. Then, if you're passionate about something that fits within NASA's Science Mission Directorate, I want you to go ahead and read the guidebook for proposers. The guidebook for proposers has no calls in it. It's a general document that teaches you what the process looks like, how to submit, what the evaluation criteria for reviews look like. Has anybody in here actually read the guidebook? Okay, good, 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 good. For those who haven't, you should read it at least once in your lifetime. I highly recommend each year that it's released You quickly check the evaluation criteria to see if they have changed. That's one of the big things that when they change, it immediately impacts how you're reviewed. Also, there's the summary of solicitation up front of the NSPIRES. We'll get into that in a moment. But the guidebook, it doesn't change on the regular. We went through some major changes like 2 years ago, and those were the first changes in, 5 years? So it doesn't change very often. That's the good news. So read the guidebook, and then start looking at roses. Start looking at the titles of the calls and roses. Start thinking, where does my portion of my passion, my research topic, where does that fit within all of this? Find calls that look interesting and look like they might have it, and then read the call. Read the call. Read the call. I will say that at least 20 times today. That will be your number one lesson. Behind rule number 1, Max already gave you, don't annoy the reviewers. All right, so you've read through the calls, you found the calls that your research would go towards, you pick your program. And then you start refining your research topic, your passion. How does my passion relate back to NASA missions? How does my passion relate back to this call at hand? Are there certain parts of this research topic that are more important and strategic for this call than other parts? And you start to refine based off of that. And then you start to think through your proposal as you're doing that refinement. You're writing down things like what's strategically important to NASA right now, what's listed in this call as a priority for selection. How do I fit within all of that? After you started to think that through, then you start to write. We just now got to writing. And you write some or most of it. You start working on it. You put up the do not disturb sign on your office door, or you work from home for 3 days and everybody's wondering where you've gone. And you start to really write this document and craft it. It's not the word write that's most important in this box. It's critique. You should get criticism as you go. You should ask others around you, is this being relayed to you in a clear way? Do you understand what I mean by this paragraph or this figure? Am I relaying this brilliant, passionate idea that I have up here? Is it actually getting transmitted on the paper such that other people understand it? You should crave that criticism, because that criticism is the thing that's helping you shape how you relay your science to the world around you, right? So utilize that as a tool, as a benefit in order to really bolster your research. And after you get that criticism, you should write again. You should fix things, make them clearer, make it more transparent, maybe, probably, make a crap ton more figures. Okay? And then you're going to submit and some other stuff's going to happen. We'll talk about that other stuff later on in this session, but just know that those are mostly out of your hands. So I have this clicker in my hand. I should probably use it. Okay, what does the NASA science pot of money look like? We're talking about right around $600 million of annual RNA budget with over 50 RNA programs. I say over 50 RNA programs because Earth Science has a ton of programs. They run somewhere close to 50 programs on a regular rotating basis, but they don't run them all each and every single year. About half of them are usually written down as not solicited this year because they run it another year, so that they'll run programs once every 2 or 3 years. And so somewhere above 50 RNA programs. Each one of those calls has anywhere from $1 to $15 million available. So these are your research and analysis size things. These are not instruments. They're small scale instruments, low TRL stuff, but they're not missions. We're not talking the big NASA money here. We're talking RNA. NASA's science research programs are managed by the Science Mission Directorate, which is led by the AA, Thomas Zurbuchen. And there's 4 science divisions within SMD: Earth Science, Heliophysics, Planetary Science, and Astrophysics. So at NASA, we love our acronyms, right? So let me teach you really quick about 3 acronyms that you heard a little bit about from Max actually earlier. Max is one of these acronyms. So let's go with the first one, ROSES. Research Opportunities in Space and Earth Science. This is where all funding, like 99% of the funding for RNA, is offered through ROSES, through the calls that are listed there. It's released typically on Valentine's Day every year because for some program officers, this is the only way they get roses on that day. But this year it was not. It was super sad. Instead, it was released on Pi Day this year because of the government shutdown. So people got roses on Pi Day. So it was like 2 super cool things at once. All right, roses divided into 2 parts. You have the front matter blah, 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 as Max described it earlier, the summary of solicitation. This describes the overall opportunity and gives you just basic proposal and submission information. And then you have each of the appendices. And there's 1 appendix for each division plus a cross-divisional appendix. So A is earth science, B is heliophysics, C is planetary science, D is astrophysics, and E is my personal favorite, the cross-divisional programs. I actually used to run one of the cross-divisional programs, the Exoplanets Research Program, which was at that time jointly managed by astrophysics and planetary. The new Exoplanets Research Program actually involves more heliophysics and earth science folks too. So that's very exciting to hear. Our second acronym on the list, and I'm going to apologize real quick because I have terrible sinuses here. So you all will watch me, like literally they're going to have on camera me using a tissue half of this time, so it's going to be great. So NSPIRES is your second acronym. The NASA Solicitation and Proposal Integrated Review and Evaluation System. I don't actually know that acronym. I have to look at the slide each and every single time and read it. You do not have to know what that means, like the actual acronym spell out. You just need to know that this is the website that you go to for everything to do with submitting proposals and reviewing for RNA. So this is your website to go to. If you're not signed up for NSPIRES, you should go and get to know it later today after this workshop. But I'm hoping that everybody here is already pretty much signed up and knows just how evil NSPIRES can be on occasion. Like when you're 15 minutes into a review and then it's like, oh, I don't want to remember any of this. And then you come back and the page is blank. And you're like, how did that happen? So that's NSPIRES. What you can find there is your summary of solicitation, your appendix overviews, your tables of deadlines, the program you intend to submit to and that you will read on repeat, and old solicitations and abstracts of selected proposals from previous years. The thing that you won't find on NSPIRES is the guidebook for proposers. And that's because the guidebook is proprietarily owned by NASA. Like it's an official NASA high-level document that can't go on the contractor website. So instead, it's here. And that's the 2018 version. The 2019 version is not out yet. There will be an announcement via NSPIRES when it is out, I'm guessing. I hope. Okay, so for those who don't know how to receive those announcements, you should go to Account Management on the NSPIRES website and click the Email Subscriptions box. You should definitely sign up for any of the divisions that you are interested in. You should not sign up for the divisions that you are not interested in. If you're not an earth scientist, you do not need earth science spam, right? If you are a planetary scientist, you definitely want to see what's happening to the planetary calls. But earth science, you'll be getting spam like once a week or something from them if you sign up on theirs and you're not actually an earth scientist. So I am on all of these just because I like to see the changes as they come, and apparently I like spam. So here's what one of the pages for the calls looks like. This is for one of the closed programs. When a program is open, it doesn't have this. That's the difference, really. So due dates are always the first ones. Table 2 lists all of the programs by the date that it's due. I mean all of them. Each and every single one of the sections is there. So I prefer table 3, which is in order by appendices. So for those in the room who like planetary science, you're hanging out in the C section of the table. For those who like astrophysics, you're hanging out in the D section. And if you're a heliophysicist, you're reading 6 whole calls, right? Summary solicitation, that front matter, blah, 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 is attached to each and every single call, so you cannot miss it. As is the full roses. And the overview of the division. How many planetary scientists do I have in the room? Make sure you read C1 yearly. Planetary science likes to make changes to the overview. How many heliophysicists do I have in the room? I will confess, even I have not read B1. Because honestly, it never changes. Heliophysics and astrophysics don't do many changes to their division overview. But planetary science and somewhat earth science, mostly planetary science, a lot of important information gets put in the division overview, the dot 1 of that appendix. So make sure you read it at the start of each new roses year. And then right below that will be the actual call. Now, Max mentioned a little bit about the order of precedence, but on this site, just know that they're in opposite order. This is the one that has the rules you have to follow, and if they don't say anything about it, then you follow these rules. And if they don't say anything about it, then you follow the rules of the summary of solicitation. And if the summary of solicitation doesn't say anything about it, it's the guidebook. So guidebook is your basic knowledge. Summary of solicitation is specific to RNA and SMD. The division overview is specific to that particular division. And then the call is the thing you really care about, right? That's our structure of power here for the call itself. I always recommend people read the question and answer section of each call as they're on there, and you can see the dates of when they get updated. So you probably might have a question. Maybe you see some sort of vague language about balloon experiments, and you're like, oh, that looks interesting. Maybe my new balloon experiment will actually fit within the mold of APRA this year. And so you look in the facts and you find out that a lot of people actually were asking questions about just that, and a clarification was made. It's good to know. If you look in previous years, something that Max brought up earlier is that previous year selections are listed for closed calls. I highly recommend, as a proposer, you go back over the last 2 to 3 years of selections and see what was picked. This is for 2 reasons. Number 1, if you're questioning whether or not you fit within the program, it's a good general information thing for what fits here. Although the call may have changed as you keep going, so read the call, but it's a good starter. 2, if the thing that you want to do already has a basically identical abstract listed here as selected the year before, ask yourself, am I putting myself in a trap where I'm going to get declined due to programmatic balance? Because they're already basically funding this research. Am I making it harder for myself to be selected because someone else is doing something identical in the portfolio already? Is there a minor modification that I can make on my work in order to actually have it be more fundable? Is there maybe a group that I should be talking to and working with who's doing identical research? Should I start to work with them and actually network? Maybe make sure they're not stealing your ideas, right? So knowing what's already out there and what's already selected is super critical and important. Also, there's always these notices down at the end of the page. Highly recommend reading them. Okay, shutdown impacts. Max went over these, so I'm going to be very quick as I go through. But basically, Roses was delayed by a month. Several calls required due date changes. We saw where June 12th, everything is due now. Not everything. I'm on camera. Just like 6 calls. But there's a large amount of calls due on June 12th. and on June 14th, and then Debbie gets to go on vacation June 15th. But yeah, but so we had some changes. We also had a few calls that had to be released a second time in ROSES 18. And one of those calls was the Exoplanets Research Program call. The reason why I'm highlighting this one is because XRP was completely rewritten. It was supposed to be pretty much announced as this brand new reformulated style program for ROSES 19. So they did a tremendous amount of work to get this call completely revitalized, and then the government shut down. And then they go to bring it out and debut it, but they have to bring it out as a second XRP call in ROSES 18 to keep the deadline date. So it's called Second Exoplanets Research Program. It's E5 now in ROSES 18. So this is a completely different call from XRP 1. And when you read the notice, it very clearly states how it's changed. So make sure that you're applying to the right program for the 3 calls that this happened to. The big one that I know is Exoplanets. There's an RSS feed with the ROSES 18 changes. There's another feed for the 19 changes. So this is ROSES 19. It was released on Pi Day. The table of the different programs will say if a program was run in ROSES 18 as a second time, like Exoplanets. They have the RSS feed up now. The Google Calendar is officially available, so you can, save the calls you want. Tables are up there by due dates. Super easy. Max went over this, so I'm flying through this slide. Okay, so we learned what NSPIRES is, and it's an acronym we never need to redefine again, just a website. We learned what ROSES is. Now let's talk about the third acronym, which is MAX. SARA, the Service and Advice for Research and Analysis website. This is MAX's website. So this is where you can get all the information basically for research and analysis in SMD at NASA. You can get really great things like a how-to guide, frequently asked question sections. The NSPIRES Helpful Hints is one of my favorite things to read. Also, when you look at his budgeting stuff, Max has a fun sense of humor, and so you could pick out of the budget stuff the funny things that he's put in there on purpose. Grant statistics. If you want to know how healthy an RNA program has been over the years, check out the grant statistics program. I asked Max yesterday in one of these sessions, and he said that they just did an update on these about a week ago. So it's relatively recent for the grant stats. Contact information for your program officers are there. Ways to review or ways to recommend reviewers for your proposals. And contact information for Max. If you want to get a hold of Max, SARA@nasa.gov. It's super easy. So check out the SARA website. Here is what that website looks like. You've got the subscription Contact SARA page over here on the for research side, the facts, the grant stats, the program officer list, the volunteer for review panels, and suggest reviewers. It's all right here under for researchers. So it's pretty hard to miss. So questions about SARA, ROSES, or NSPIRES? No? All right, let's go ahead and move on to general proposal writing guidance. And let's start by managing everybody's expectations. So here's what's not going to happen. You are not going to write a novel. If you do, you will probably be non-compliant to a 15-page cutoff. This is not meant to be Moby Dick, right? This is meant to be a proposal. You're not going to definitively answer the grand question plaguing your community. I don't really know of anybody who's won a Nobel Prize from an RNA award, just an RNA award. That'd be super impressive, and I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong on that. Your audience is not going to review this in a quiet, uninterrupted setting. They will not be reviewing this the same way that you attempted to write it. Your audience will not be world experts on your topic. The world expert on your passion and your research topic is yourself. You're conflicted. Now, we could ask you to review your own proposal, but I suspect you're going to struggle to come up with weaknesses. And if you do come up with a lot of them, why did you submit it? And your audience will not accept your approach without question. We give them criteria that basically say, question their approach, right? So here's what is going to happen. You are going to write a focused, no-frills document of a limited, narrow scope. Something that you can do with part of your time in 3 years, right? Your audience is going to review this amid the chaos of their lives. I call this the screaming baby on an airplane rule. Because here's what happens. The first few, they review at home. And then they get pulled into a whole bunch of meetings and a whole bunch of research stuff. And then suddenly they're getting an email from the program officer being like, why haven't you sent in your reviews yet? You leave tomorrow to fly to the review panel. And so they say, don't worry, I'll get it done on the airplane. And then they sit down on the airplane, and they have a baby screaming and vomiting right beside them. But they've got to get the review done. So that's when they read your proposal. Screaming baby on an airplane roll. Your audience will be colleagues from similar fields. They're not the direct expert. They're just somebody who knows a thing or two about your research topic, and there's somebody who's an expert on something else that is closely related. We say for planetary scientists, for planetary science at least, that like we can ask any planetary scientist to review a proposal. We don't generally follow that rule. I'm not going to ask a geologist to review a proposal on exospheres. That's just cruel and unusual to the geologist, right? Likewise, I'm not going to expect an exosphere expert to understand what's happening on the interior core of a planetary body necessarily. So we try to get people within close proximity of the field of topic. Your audience is going to be skeptical and critical. They're going to ask lots of questions about your research. Likewise, this is not a technical report. This is not a journal article. Recognize that we expect something different from your proposal. Look at where the technical approach and methodology is, which is on both, but look where your impact to the state of knowledge goes within a proposal versus just a standard technical report. Because the standard technical report, you're like, here's what I did, here's my results. Yeah, it's important. And a proposal is, here's why I'm important, and here's what I intend to do. Likewise, when you look at expected significance, here's why I'm important, and here's what I intend to do. Not, oh, and I'm important, at the very end as a one-line sentence. Know what you're getting into. Make sure you start with the vision of the work you want to do. Make sure you start with that thought process of here's my passion, here's my research topic. I'm going to mold it from here. And then work to be responsive to the call. Work to refine your scope to be responsive. But don't find a call and figure out what to propose just to get funding, because you're forgetting the passion part. Proposal writing is a long-term process. This is a hard thing for people to understand as they look at these, but your reputation is made on how well you deliver when you win or lose proposals. I know people who have put in 5-page proposals for a 15-page program that they were like, I just want to get the idea out there and see what the panel has to say about the idea. And the panel has seen that proposal and been like, they literally gave me a third of a proposal. This is ridiculous. Why are they wasting our time? They know this isn't going to be funded. So you may have had the intentions that you were just trying to see how your idea would do, and instead what you've given your proposal is something that, or your reviewers is basically something that they said, wow, this person does half the work. Good to know. Good to know about this human. You don't want to do that. So remember to put in a quality piece of work each time. Proposal writing involves far more than just writing. Make sure you're serving on committees. Be a reviewer yourself. Chair special sessions at meetings. Publish papers. Know your program managers. How many of you know your program officer for the programs that you apply to? Good. For those who don't, your job at your next conference is to find them, to say hello to them, and to talk about your research a little bit. They're used to random strangers coming up to them and saying, "Hi, you're blah, blah, blah. Here's my name. Nice to meet you." That might be all it is, but it's good to at least know the face that goes with the name attached to the program. Program officers for most of the divisions go to the large science conferences attached. So Division of Planetary Sciences, Lunar Planetary Science Conference, American Astronomical Society Conference, AGU. So you can find your program officers at these big conferences. Make sure that if you participate or convene a relevant workshop, that you follow through to the end and that you are part of the report. Make sure your name is attached to the report that gets cited, because it's a shame for you to be a huge portion of the organization of that work just for other people to get credit for it. So make sure you're putting your name on these reports to be cited. Make sure you read the proposal call carefully. We had one program officer who made just a few sentence change to his call from one year to the next. And after he did that, it was done right at the beginning of Roses, so you don't see like the bold font for the changes. It wasn't like it came out as a clarification or an amendment or anything like that. It was the original call. Those few sentence changes ruled 30% non-compliant and out of scope that next year. So make sure you read the call each and every single year and that you ask, does my research fit here? Feel free to contact the program officer and ask them, am I within the scope of this program? They can answer questions about scope. They can't tell you how you're going to do. They're not going to give you a leg up on the competition, but they're the ones who determine what the scope of the call is. Make sure you understand programmatic relevance of your idea. NASA is a mission-based agency, right? That's primarily what NASA does. That's where their big money is. So what missions will you propose to help make cheaper, better, or possible at all? How does your fundamental research fit within that? It's okay if it doesn't exactly fit within, especially for some of the calls that are more fundamental focused. But if you do have an emphasis on work that can be applied towards missions, you should be amplifying that within your proposal, particularly to a place like NASA. Use the National Academy reports that are out there, the strategic plans, the roadmaps for guidance. If your research is explicitly called out in one of these documents, you should be explicitly calling that out in your proposal. Say, look, the National Academies came out with this report, this little thing called a decadal survey, and my work is highlighted in it. It's right here. Make sure you highlight that and ask your colleagues and supervisors for help. When you're organizing a proposal, recognize that organization is key. Think about the reviewer trapped on the airplane with the screaming, vomiting baby beside it. All right, maybe, okay, let's stop the baby from vomiting, because that's going to get all over the proposal. Let's just have the baby be screaming, all right? They're going through your document, they're skimming through it, and they think about something that was 5 pages back. There's this really key important sentence that you had there. Okay, I need to go back to that real quick to understand this. So they go back, and they can't find it because there's no clear signpost. Or worse, they were flipping through and they were just seeing your pretty pictures because they were super distracted by the baby. And then they're trying to go back to connect the words with the pictures, but you don't even have the figures properly referenced within the document. You have referenced figure X throughout, where your LaTeX has just screwed it up, right? So make sure that you are providing clear signposts throughout the proposal. Use the SARE website to help you out here for a bit, but here's the generic outline, and here's the link for Table 1 of roses. How many people have looked at Table 1 before? Okay, yeah, a couple of people. Table 1 is the compliance checklist. It's a 4-page table you can print off and you can check as you go to make sure you have everything. Typically, that, while it's not required to be in that order within the STM, that's the pretty typical order you see. And as a reviewer, when you're used to seeing things in a certain order, and then somebody comes in with another piece of work that is in a totally different order, you get confused. You get annoyed. And what's rule number 1? Don't annoy the reviewers. So if you can put this in a format that makes it easier for them to find it, like clockwork, then you're making their lives easier. So make sure you use Table 1. Also, if something is missing, like you're going through and you're checking, and then you go, oh, I don't have my CVs attached yet. I'll come back to this later. And you keep going, make sure you actually come back, or stop what you're doing and put your CV in. I know somebody who is ruled non-compliant because they forgot to attach their CV. It's a required piece of this document. Make sure that you don't forget the compliance parts. Don't put your entire livelihood and existence within the field into the hands of the program officer's mercy. Not all program officers have mercy, especially if they just were on an airplane with a screaming baby beside them, right? So make sure all the documents are there. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through very quickly some of these sections. Not all the sections, but some of them. So let's have a title contest. Which one of these 3 titles do you think is good? Number 1, a novel approach to mapping atmospheric ozone. Number 2, a low-cost laser occultation sensor for precisely mapping global atmospheric ozone. Or number 3, precise mapping of global atmospheric ozone, a low-cost laser occultation sensor. Hold them up for me. Which one do you like? 1, 3, 2. Okay. Now, when you are a reviewer, what happens is you take a look at these and you print off the document via Inspires, and the first page that you get is half the title, right? Because it just chops it off. So which one is actually the most useful out of those 3? Now that you're missing half of it. 1, 2, or 3? Right? So make sure you're using short, keywords up front titles so that your work is memorable even when you only have that many characters. All right? Abstract. This is usually the first thing that's read, and it's probably the only thing that's read. It's not probably the only thing read. So for your primary reviewer and your secondary reviewers, they've read the document. But for those who are sitting on the screaming baby airplane, and they're just now finishing up their primaries and getting through their secondaries, and they're not actually assigned to your proposal, but they need to participate in this conversation, guess how much of your proposal they read? The abstract and maybe your figure captions, right? If they're really excited about the research, they'll read more. But those are like the bare minimum. Your selecting official will only really see this. The big thing I want to note about your abstracts, and you can make sure all this other stuff is in there when you get these slides later, but remember edits between when you submit a step 1 or a notice of intent or your step 2. So you have this project that you put in for step 1, and you want to look at the atmospheres of Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. So you have 5 tasks. Only task 5 has anything to do with the atmosphere of Venus, right? So tasks 1 through 4 are Mars and Jupiter. You start writing the actual proposal. You lose your Venus expert. Or you realize that the modeling efforts that you want to have, you don't even have the initial correct input parameters to put in there, or you don't have the lab data that's needed to fully understand it. Something is there to where task number 5 on Venus cannot be done. So you don't put anything in your major proposal on Venus. You get rid of task 5, you get rid of all the Venus stuff, you get rid of the Venus person. But if you haven't gone back and fixed your abstract before resubmitting it, you have this thing sitting in the abstract, the thing that everybody has read in the room that says the word Venus. And maybe there's a Venus expert in the room who's really super excited about this data. And they go, oh, but what about the Venus part? And everybody else in the room goes, oh, you just read the abstract. You're the one that had the screaming baby on the airplane beside you. No, there's actually no Venus work in this entire proposal. What? That's the part that was going to be amazing. That's the part that was actually the reward. This other stuff's already been done before. You just set yourself up for a whole line of weaknesses to be shot your way for a piece of a task that you had no intention of ever doing after the fact, right? So make sure you edit between step 2 and step 1. Save this for the very end. Read your abstract and edit it one more time before you submit. Your introduction needs to focus on clarity, readability, and absence of jargon. You should not be talking down to your review panel. You do not sound smarter than your review panel. When you do that, you sound egotistical. And that's not good when a group of experts are trying to read your work. So make sure that you write this to the level of your review panel, which are experts in a similar but not direct field. Have somebody that's in a similar but not direct field read it before you submit it. Make sure that you're not throwing jargon out there that's only your way of communicating with yourself, you know? We all have that. I have several words that I use that I trigger to know certain things about the type of research that I would do that's not useful to anybody else. So make sure that the proposal is not full of that. Make sure that if you have, acronyms in there for unusual instruments that you use on a daily basis, that it's actually defined the first time you use it. Make sure that you have at least one figure that shows the state of the art and how you're going to advance it. Not a paragraph, not a page. I want a figure. And the reason why is this is how you get a cheerleader in the room for your research. Nobody holds up a piece of paper and says, have you read this paragraph? They're gonna reshape everything in the field. No, what they do is they pull up the proposal, they scroll to the figure, and they say, yeah, but look at this. Here's the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Here's where the research is currently being done. Here's where they fill in the gaps with this data. That's super critical and important. We want and need that. It's far easier for a cheerleader in the review room to be there holding up your picture, your figure, than it is holding up a paragraph. So use figures whenever possible. And make sure that you cite key references. I don't just mean you. Yes, I do mean your arch nemesis. Especially if your arch nemesis might be in the room. Have you ever read a piece of a 15-page document on something that you do, only you're not the one that's proposing it, someone else is, and they don't mention your work at all? How do you think that makes you feel? Do you think maybe it annoys you slightly? Do you think it's maybe something you'd focus on a lot in the back of your head, get some good imposter syndrome going, and then have to prove yourself so you just take down that proposal, right? So make sure that you cite people in the field who are doing that research at that moment, even if they are your worst enemy. For your problem statement, for your objective, this is the thing that all 15 of these pages is about, right? You have one main goal. Somewhere on page 1, that should be a clearly defined problem. You should be continuously referencing it, and you should box it in on page 1. Separate that sentence from the rest of them. This is what the heck I'm doing. This is the goal of this entire 15-page document. If you can't figure out what that sentence is, you haven't clearly defined your objective of your research yet. So go back and do that, because that's super critical and important to the entire 15-page document. Because every proposed action should be traceable to that objective. You have 5 tasks, right? Written down. We'll say you have 5. 4 of them make sense and map directly back to the problem statement. One of them has nothing to do with the rest of the research. It's just a random thing that you thought would be kind of fun to do on the side. You've received a weakness the year before that you lack details to clearly define whether or not you could do this objective. What's the thing you cut? The thing that has nothing to do with the overall objective of the proposal. How do you narrow down and focus in on the objective at hand? You box it in a big, bold, pink box. You don't have to use pink. It just happens to be the color I wanted to use. But you bold it into this box and you continuously look at it. I have been known to take my bold boxes and put them on the wall so that, like, as I'm going, I'll be like, well, that's the task at hand. Back to that. Don't let the distractions get you. Back to hand, right? So make sure you do this. Here's some more general guidance for you. Thoroughly review and cite the literature. Avoid full pages of text. When I help somebody who has been having trouble with their proposals, and they bring it to me and they say it's because the review panel was full of morons, the first thing I do is they sit down with me before they even get fully sat down, and so I'm like, give me the proposal, and they give it to me, and I bust out my little sticky thumbtacks, and I start putting them on each page of the proposal that is just text. And if I have more than 7 sticky tacks, I hand it back to them and I say, come back when you're under 7. 7 or below. Bye. It's lovely seeing you. Usually that gets me yelled at. It gets somebody to be like, how dare you? Like, you haven't even bothered to look. I've looked enough. You had no figures or tables. I bet your weaknesses are that you did not clearly show something. Let's go through and look, and then you'll see where it's like, they did not even list what molecules were going to be used within the molecular mixtures. And I'm like, that can be a table. Here's the table. I include tables as a figure. So, basic rule of thumb, 7 or under for text. The best proposals that I've honestly seen, maybe 3 pages of just text. The worst, absolute worst proposals that I can see in my brain that are just seared in there are the ones that were 14 to 15 pages of text, and they used a mix of bold, italics, and regular font to try to separate things, and it did not work. It just made it a word soup, is the easy description. Don't write word soup. Actually use figures. Captions are typically the first thing that's looked at. How many people saw this and was like, oh, what a lovely tree. She's still talking, isn't she? Right? Captions are read before the detailed text, particularly when they're bigger than the actual detailed text. If your text in your caption is extremely useful, it will excite the reviewer. When I review documents, large piles, say I'm in a panel of 20, I'm given a certain amount for primary, a certain amount for secondary, a certain amount. I'm the person who reads them all, minus the CVs, which we found out yesterday. I'm the only person who doesn't read anybody's CV, apparently. But what I do is I take them and I look at the abstract and I read the abstract of all of them, and then I flip through and I see the ones that have really interesting figures and captions and be like, which one of these excite me? Whichever ones excite me are the ones that I review first. Whichever ones are the least exciting, I throw to the bottom of the pile. And I get to them eventually. And by the time I get to them, I'm exhausted. I'm tired of reading. And now I've put myself in the unfortunate circumstance of where I'm reading even more because you didn't use figures effectively. I'm not the most pleased reviewer on the planet. I'm mildly annoyed. And what's rule number 1? Don't annoy the reviewer. So, use your captions and your figures. Run spell check. I know a person who, I still laugh when I think about it, they somehow they auto-corrected their word check to change Jupiters to Diopters. So they had hot Diopters throughout their entire proposal. They did not lose any of they did not get hit in their evaluation for this. It was a very polite comment to the proposer, like, hey, heads up, fix your word check. like fix word, change the word back to Jupiter, please. But the panel could not get over it. They just could not. The entire rest of the week, they thought it was hilarious to send to the program officers Diopters and their evaluations. And it actually increased the amount of time that I had to spend editing evaluations later on, like afterwards when we do the final check of them before, because I was so scared that I was going to send to a proposer hot Diopters instead of Jupiters, and they'd be like, what type of a panel did she organize? They don't even know what the word is, you know? So make sure you run spell check, proofread it. Justify yourself as PI, defend the selection of your co-Is, a rule for every team member, a team member for every rule. Demonstrate excellence, don't just claim it. If you are working with women or underrepresented minorities, and they are an expert in their field, damn it, name them expert. I'm getting a little angry, but it's one of those weird implicit bias things that I saw on repeat for 5 years at headquarters for some odd reason, and women do this to themselves. They'll list all of their male colleagues as experts, but not themselves as the PI. Or likewise, I see one of the guys that's a co-I will be listed as an expert, and yet, you know, the male PI will be, but the co-I who's a female who's also like world-renowned in the field will not be an expert on the topic. Don't be afraid of the word expert, particularly if you are the expert on your passion, on your research topic. Make sure, if you're writing this down for your entire team, that you use the word uniformly. Demonstrate clear roles and responsibilities, and use tables in this area, but don't go overboard like this. This is my example of what going overboard looks like. Yes, this is part of the proposal for this particular workshop. This is me being excessive and trying to joke around with myself. And then I put this into the actual proposal because I thought, oh, Max is going to be so mad at me. So, you're welcome, Max. It's cool. A reviewer noted it to me that it was excessive. So, take it that way. Make sure that for each task you have one of these lines, but not multiple lines for any one task. All right, can you do the job on schedule? Your reviewers are going to be skeptical. Are you utilizing your FTEs properly? Your reviewers are going to think about that. Can you do the job for the budget? That's your program officer. Your reviewers cannot see your full budget. This is a good thing, because then they can't do the whole bang for buck. They can't be like, oh, well, you could fund these 350K awards instead of this one 200K award. They don't get to do that. That's the program officer's job. So instead, they're looking and they're saying, oh, they want to do 2 weeks of lab experiments here, but they ask for a full FTE, and it's only 2 weeks worth of stuff. Well, asking for way too much time. It's actually, most of the time, the exact opposite. You'll say that you want to do 4 months of experiments, and then you'll only ask for 0.1 FTE time. How is the work getting done? Who is doing this magical other work? Does the equipment secretly run itself late at night when no one's around? Are you all using child slave labor? Like, what is happening? So, don't do that. Request the proper amounts of FTEs to actually accomplish the research. The FTE table needs to include not only the amount of funding requested by this project, but also the amount of funding that's attached that's already funded through another element. Maybe through your time here, maybe you have some sort of special individual research grant that can cover half of your research time or something. You have to make sure you put that into your FTE table. Have a clear budget And don't try to sneak things in there. So one of the big things that I saw that was a weakness on cost was that folks would ask for page charges in year 1, but they actually wouldn't be publishing until year 2. Or they would ask to go to 3 different conferences to present their material in year 1, but they said that they wouldn't have anything ready for presenting until year 2. Why are you asking for year 1 publication charges and travel if you don't intend to actually have anything ready for those until year 2? So make sure you justify what you're doing and don't try to sneak things in. Follow the guidebook instructions for facilities and dependencies. For the facilities portion, don't try to sneak stuff that should be in your STM in there. I had someone once call me and actually say, you know, I did mention this critical component of the work. It's back in the facility section. Wait, is it something that should have been in the STM? Well, yeah, but I was at 15 pages. I don't know. That's not how we get bonus pages. It was not read. So, no, that's not how this works. Make sure that you keep the facilities pages to just quick information on the facility. And don't expect the majority of the panelists to read that section. So here's some overall proposal development advice. Read the call. Demonstrate excellence. Don't just claim it. You need a cheerleader. You need that champion in the review panel for your proposal. So make it easier for them by providing that material right up front in figures. Read the call again. Examine the selection criteria and directly address them up front. We'll go over the selection criteria here when we get to the peer review portion. Have you actually read the call? Proposals lose because of a single sentence or paragraph. So get folks to review your work before submitting it and use their feedback. Oh, and I have a question. Did you read the call? Remember for proposal writing mistakes that you can avoid making common mistakes through having people review your work. Have someone edit your work for grammatical issues. Have somebody else review your work scientifically. Recognize that this is not the same human being. This is not one person. These are 2 very different people. So make sure that you get 2 people with very different agendas to look at your proposal. You should start as a co-I or student member and learn from them on proposals. I know a postdoc who purposefully went to work with someone because they knew that they write fantastic proposals and that they almost always got funding. And they went to work with them so that they could learn the tricks of the trade. So find those people within your network and embrace working with them. And make sure that you serve on panels for experience. Max mentioned that when you go to serve on a panel, it's not necessarily about learning how to win, it's learning how to lose. I actually think that that is slightly wrong. I know somebody who served on multiple panels in 1 year. And when they saw something that they really liked, like how someone organized their proposal, they would take notes on that in their head. They would remember the organization way. They would remember how people presented their research for the state of the art compared to what the state of the art was. And they used those types of building templates together to recreate their own proposals. And they won 5 for 5 the next year. So utilize that experience to not just learn what crap proposals look like, but use it to learn, like, why is it that this was so easy for me to read? Why was this something that I actually enjoyed picking up as a document compared to the others? Oh, it's because of the format. Oh, it's because there's signposts. Oh, it's because, hey, look, I was able to always pinpoint right back to the objective. See what that looks like. When you're thinking of peer review, I want you to remember that you're writing for 2 audiences. The first audience is the program officer, the manager, the point of contact. We're going to call them the program officer for the rest of this, just because it's a little bit easier. But this is the person that's ensuring the work will further the program objectives, and they're the one that's going to verify that the funds are going to be used properly. This requires that you write a compliant proposal. This requires that you write a proposal within the scope of the budget of the program. So that's what the program officer is for. The other group, the review panel, are the ones who are ensuring that the work is of high scientific quality. So your job as a proposal writer is to make it as easy as possible for these two audiences to select your proposal. Neither of these audiences actually make selections. What happens is the review panel comes up with some findings that is given to the program officer, who then creates a selection document that goes to the selecting official. And the selecting official is either the division director or the RNA lead, depending upon which division. So in earth science and planetary science, it's the RNA lead. In heliophysics and astrophysics, right now, it's primarily the division director that are the selecting officials. But it's these two audiences that really crafted the things that go into the selecting document, that selection document that gets to them. So you want to make it as easy as possible for these two groups to make sure that your name is in the selection document. In general, in peer review, what happens is that the program officer, could I get a little bit more water? Thank you. Sorry.
No.
The program officer is going to choose panel members from the greater science community. They're going to avoid conflicts of interest. So you here at SETI cannot review other research from SETI. I, at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, cannot review work from JPL or the California Institute of Technology, because the California Institute of Technology, thank you, pays my check. Oh, yeah. You didn't like the sound of that? Sorry. Need to stop torturing the sound people. So, I am a California Institute of Technology employee, so I cannot review Caltech and JPL proposals. The program officer is going to ensure that the evaluations are fair and unbiased. They're going to be the ones who monitor for implicit bias in the room. They're going to be the ones that make sure that there's enough reviewers for each proposal. They're going to be, making sure that the process stays consistent throughout. Internal or external reviewers may or may not be used. Internal are the in-house group that gets together to make a decision. External used to be called mail-in reviewers. You no longer have to literally mail in your review, so we call them external reviewers now. Proposals will be given a score or assessment based off of strengths and weaknesses that are based on a set criteria that are given. And large panels, like solar system workings, may be split into subpanels. And when they split these into subpanels based off of topic or instrument used or whatever for that particular program it is, when they do that split, they'll have some sort of plenary sessions or meetings with the leadership of each of these different subpanels to ensure consistency is happening. Review panels at NASA follow the dog show rule, which is that proposals are not to be compared to each other by the review panel. So this is one of our subpanels here. Now, our Chihuahua is not going to be compared directly to the Beagle, because look at those floppy ears, right? Instead, this Chihuahua is going to be compared to the standard of excellence of Chihuahuas that we know, which is the Taco Bell dog. So how does this Chihuahua compare to the Taco Bell dog? Likewise, my cat Mobius has a difficult time with the dog show rule, because Mobius is in a subpanel of dogs. Mobius is a little bit of a black sheep. Actually, he's a black cat, but he's the black cat in a panel of dogs. If your research topic is on the border of the topic of the program, and your subpanel is mostly stuff that is not like yours, it is on you to make sure that you show how you fit in the box. Because you're being reviewed on the dog show rule. You're being reviewed to the standard of excellence of that program. So how does Mobius fit within the dog show rule? How does your research fit within this program? Also, I just wanted to put a picture of my cat in here. There are 3 criteria for peer review that are independently assessed. What does the word independently mean there? It doesn't mean necessarily that they all divide and conquer. It's that if you rank low in any one of these, you can be non-selectable. So you've got to check all 3 of these boxes. Number 1, intrinsic merit. That's the science and technical merit. That's the reason why we get the review panels we get together. They're the ones who are looking primarily at intrinsic merit. Number 2, relevance. Well, we have a slide on it, but it's basically the relevance to the program at hand. And 3, cost, which does not mean total cost here. It means how do you utilize your time. Criteria are detailed in the guidebook for proposers. Here's the website again. Additional criteria may be outlined in the specific call, which is why we always read the call. Look for language like will be judged or reviewed upon. If you see that language in a call, they're telling you this is another one of your evaluation criteria that you need to fulfill. Exoplanets Research Program used to have an example of this. There used to be a sentence in the XRP call that said that proposals would be judged upon the perceived impact to near-term NASA observations, as in within the next 5 years, those NASA missions, right? And so that was on the posters that got stuck on the wall for the review. Intrinsic merit had 5 criteria, not the normal 4, and the 5th one was near-term observations, because it was a requirement of the call. And for the folks who were doing theoretical work that had no applications clearly outlined in the proposal to NASA missions or to any observations, they had a major weakness if they did not outline that anywhere within their work. So here's the 4 intrinsic merit criteria that are in the guidebook for definitions. Or sorry, the guidebook for proposers. I just saw a NASA headquarters person go by, so I was like, whoa, hello. So number 1, scientific quality of the proposed project. 2, technical quality of the proposed work. 3, qualifications, capabilities, and related expertise of the team as determined in the proposal. And number 4, the facilities, instruments, and equipment as defined in their proposal. I use the words as defined in the proposal for these 2 because this isn't a good old boys club. You actually have to list it in the proposal, and the proposal is the thing that's evaluated, not your awesomeness as a human being, because we are all awesome and amazing every way, but the proposal itself. How does that detail those information? For relevance, it's judged against the text of the call. How effective is your proposal's claim of relevance? Assuming everything works, would the results be relevant to the program? Criteria is actually a little bit complicated for most reviewers, but honestly, for most programs, it's a checkbox. Are you in the program, or are you not in the program? In terms of the research you want to do. If your research is not related to this call, where else should it go? Okay? Cost does not mean bang for buck, does not mean total dollars. It's are the resources requested, the full-time equivalent, the amount of time that you're going to put towards the work, the travel money, the supplies, are those appropriate for the proposed research? Are the amounts of resources requested realistic given the panelist experience? Reviewers don't get to evaluate the bottom line, which is a good thing. But you should be putting in enough FTEs to actually do the research that you're proposing to do. I've heard questions being asked recently on, oh, well, if I put in less FTE, then I'm cheaper, and then I'll be able to be selected because it's a super cheap proposal. No, you'll get a cost weakness that says that you didn't dedicate enough time to actually be able to accomplish the work. And that's super important. So the panelists are going to assess. They're going to give you a list of strengths and weaknesses. And then they're going to give you a score. And that score is based off of the NRA guidebook definition. So this table right here is in the NRA guidebook. You can pull it up and you can read what each one of those terms, each one of those ratings means. All proposals start off at good, because you have no weaknesses and no strengths before you begin. And as the panel starts adding strengths, it starts coming up towards very good or excellent. And as they start adding weaknesses, it starts going down. And it's a balancing act between these definitions. Now, you may get assigned a score for intrinsic merit. You may get assigned a score for relevance. You may get assigned a score for cost. And you may get an overall score. You may not. It depends upon the program. Some programs use a 3-step score for relevance. I used to use a checkbox. Were you relevant? Yes or no? I only asked for an intrinsic merit score. There are other programs out there who give you just an overall review. And so you look at it and you have to say, okay, my overall scores are very good, but I see no weaknesses here for relevance and cost. So I guess I came down a little bit because of the weaknesses on merit. Or you look at it very good and you go, I have no weaknesses in merit, but I have this cost weakness sitting down there. I guess what happened was I was excellent in the merit category, but I had this cost weakness, and that's what brought my score down. Some of the programs use just 1 is poor, 2 is fair, 3 is good, 4 is very good, 5 is excellent. Other programs will let you do halves. So this is an excellent, very good. Other divisions or programs will have you write it down anonymously to the 10th decimal. Somebody tell me what the difference between a 4.1 and a 4.0 is, and don't say 1/10. Right? What is that difference when looking at strengths and weaknesses? So it depends upon the program you apply to. One of the easiest ways to learn the tricks of the trade of your program is to review for the program when you can, because then you know what your review process is going to look like in follow-on years. Other issues for reviewing. Remember the crying baby on an airplane rule. Assume your reviewer is highly distracted when they're reading your document. Here are some of the things that upset reviewers. Typos, full pages of dense text, lack of clarity, lack of organization, lack of relevance to the call. Your summary or abstract is old and not on the actual topic of the proposal. One of my personal favorites is a proposal that demonstrated its relevance to the National Science Foundation. That is not the right agency, let alone the right program. So, don't do those things, because that's how you annoy your reviewers. One of the ways that you can get to understand this process a little bit is through a thing called red teams. How many people here have ever participated in a red team? How many people here know what that definition, that word means? Some people are kind of like, what? What is a red team? Red team is an internal review. It's an in-house review before it goes out the door. So basically what you do is you assign 2 to 3 people to the proposal. They get a copy of the proposal. They get the evaluation criteria from the guidebook. You maybe lock them in a room with food, and then you say, I'll open back up the door when you're done. I'll slide more food under if needed, but no water for anybody until this is completed. I'm just kidding. Please don't lock your colleagues into rooms. But here's the things that you want to focus on when you're getting that internal review. What worked? What didn't work? What might work better? And then line edits. Because this is not like a panel evaluation coming back to you for the time where it's decided and done. They can tell you things that might work better here. They can suggest improvements to you. Here's what you should focus on when you receive back either a panel review or your red team. Did I do this right? Tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what was not clear. I want you to correct me. I want to crave that criticism because I have an image for what my passion is, what this research topic is. And this image that is seared into the front of my brain may not be the same thing that I communicated and relayed in my 15-page document. And if it's not, I want my red team to tell me it's not so that I can improve the way that I relay that information. So I want that criticism so that by the time it gets to the review panel, it's clearly laid out. It may not be perfect. It likely is not going to be anywhere near perfect, but it's a start. Don't take criticism personally in this moment. And remember that there's many versions of true. You might be thinking in your brain 2 + 2 = 4. And you may have wrote down 2.5 + 1.5 = 4. And the review panel might be thinking 1 + 3 = 4. Why the heck am I following these things? All of these things actually equal 4. How are you communicating that out to each other? How are we getting to the stated objective there of 4 in a way that makes sense for everybody and is easy? Write down the important bits of your criticism. If somebody's giving you feedback and they did not have time to write it out themselves, make sure that you write it out. Maybe even politely ask them, like, if you're going to give me my feedback face-to-face, is it okay if I record that? I promise to delete it after I make the changes, but I just want to be able to make sure I get everything down. Preferably get it in handwriting or in typing. It's so much easier that way. And don't waste the chance to learn by defending. So many times I help somebody with a proposal, and they go to sit down, and I say, okay, well, here's weakness number 1 from your review panel. And we read it out, and they go, yeah, but, and then they tell me 5 things that are nowhere in the proposal. And I go, okay, and? They're like, you just need to know all of that before. And I'm like, no, was it in the proposal? Well, no, but you should already know these things. Okay, we're spending more time on you trying to teach me than we are on the document at hand that should have clearly relayed that information. So make sure that you are taking the chance to improve the document because it's about the proposal. Serve on panels to get a greater understanding of the review process. We've already said that like 5 times, but one more time just in case. And then after the peer review, you have selections. Program officers are going to integrate the findings of the panels with programmatic balance and budgetary considerations. And programmatic balance is an important factor. Programmatic balance is your program officer looking at their entire portfolio and understanding what's already in it and what needs to be added for the benefit of NASA as a whole. What are the NASA priorities right at this moment? What are the priorities of this program right at this moment? What does my budget look like at this moment? Those are the things that the program officer is taking into consideration as they look at the rack and stack of these different subpanels. So, program officer will formulate a list of recommendations. What I did here, we have a proposal program that got 100 proposals, okay? These are the top 8 proposals from 4 different subpanels. So there were 4 panels of 25 proposals each, and these were the top 8 scores, okay? Now, the blue ones here, we've got 2 EVGs and 2 VGs. We're going to call that the atmospheres panel. The orange VG here is a geology panel. The green EVG is going to be our cosmochemistry panel. And our 2 E's, our purple ones, are sitting in the lab ice panel. Because lab ice is great in every way, so of course they've got 2 excellence. When you look at these, you have these 8 here. One of these 2 perfect scoring ones is missing something in the budget. So these scores are intrinsic merit. They're not overalls, they're just intrinsic merit. So this is how they're science rated. This one, this VG here sitting in geology, was told that it's a NASA priority. So there was something written within the call that said this type of research will be prioritized this year. Maybe, I don't know, maybe some sort of senator decided that we really need that research done and they earmarked some money towards programs to ensure this type of research is done. This happens to be on that type of research. Your selecting official comes back to you. Sure, go ahead.
So what if someone has the priority, but it also has an error? Is it selected or selectable, or does that depend on the program officer?
We're going to get to it.
Okay.
Because it doesn't just depend upon the program officer either. So, you're getting ready to write your selection document, and your division director comes to you and says, hey, remember these NASA priorities as you're writing this. We have this earmarked money. You'll be able to get a little bit more money to your program, so you can either select 3, or you can have some of this earmarked money and possibly select 4 if you pick something else on this topic. Okay? I'm going to pick this because I'm getting special money for it in the program just for that topic because it's a NASA priority. Or my boss told me I had to pick it. So it's in the selection document. Or I didn't pick it initially. I write this, bless you, I write the selection document, and then my boss comes back and says, there's this priority thing that we need to do this year that's sitting next down. Can you squeeze that in there? You get something along those lines can happen. So this one has to be picked. Okay? It's a NASA priority. All right. So you want to pick the perfect ones, but this one has a budget error. So you're not going to pick it quite yet. You're going to pick this one. Okay? And you've got this one on a different topic. So if you look at the entire portfolio of the budget, you really want to make sure that you have something in there that's cosmochemistry. So this top-rated one is going in. Now, out of these 2 EVGs, which one do I select? I'm asking the audience. It's not flipping a coin. Maybe one's slightly cheaper than the other. Maybe one is on a topic that is not in the portfolio. Maybe this one is on a topic that is similar to something I chose last year, and so that helps me out a little bit. It tells me which one to pick. Maybe this one has a bit more risk and reward to it, so it has a higher impact. Maybe this one has an early career researcher on it that they're going to get an early career fellowship if I choose them. Maybe, I don't know, there's a lot of maybes. That's what programmatic balance is. It's a lot of maybes, right? It's how do I get from these 8 amazing, awesome proposals to just 4? Welcome to programmatic balance. Sure.
Is there any good way to find out what has been earmarked?
Have you read the budget for this year? It'll say within the budget how much money has to go towards, like, say, Europa Lander or Europa Clipper. So if there's investments in technology that go towards those, they can use some of that funding. But it really depends upon how it's earmarked. But the total budget that gets approved is mentioned, like it's literally come out from Congress. How it gets translated to each of the separate divisions within the agencies is a trickier thing. So, but we're trying to utilize the money as much as possible. It's not like we're not trying to use the money.
But it seems like all you can do is guess in terms of how the larger budget will affect individual program elements.
It depends. Go ahead, Max.
I just wanted to point out that, there are times that the call will explicitly say, like, it seems to me
Last year, lunar.
there was some language where it explicitly said, hey, we not a guarantee, it's written before the budget, but hey, we're hearing there's going to be extra money for lunar, so heads up. And that went into that bold notice at the top of the call. So there was some indication. So there's often an indication, but not always.
Usually that type of programmatic consideration is done later on and at a level of, like, you have the best of the best rise up, and then you have the little bit of crumbs that get to be remaining afterwards. You have some selectable stuff sitting there, and you're able to pull from those with what earmarked money is available. But it's usually after the rest of the budget gets sorted and dealt with particularly when you have like massive 2020 overruns, or you have a whole bunch of money being earmarked to Clipper, which I'm happy about as a project staff scientist on Clipper, but I understand where that becomes complicated for the RNA programs. Yeah. Okay, so when you're selected, yay! You go on Facebook and you're like, I just got funded, yeah. Like you brag about it everywhere, and that's a good thing. Brag away. Make sure you offer to serve on the next review panel, particularly if you're not reapplying for more funding. If you don't offer, the program officer will likely contact you anyways, but you're now the standard of excellence for that review program, and they want to make sure they maintain that standard, and so by you being a part of the panel, you're helping to set that standard. Stay in touch with the program officer regarding funding receipts. One of the things I took out of this is a really ugly slide I have on how the money gets to you. I took it out because it's even more complicated here, because the money like goes to Ames and then it comes to you, and then it's like, I don't know, magical how it works here compared to the other centers and the other contractors that I know. So I took that slide out. Here's my big message on you. If you don't receive the funding within 90 days of getting the award letter, just ask your program officer, hey, has there been like a delay in receipt of funding? Did it go down a magical black hole? I'm super confused. So make sure you check to see where funding is. And plan far ahead if you have a critical deadline for receipt of funds, particularly if it is for your students and your postdocs. The thing that would upset me the most is when an advisor would contact me and say, oh, I forgot to ask you for this 2 months ago when you requested it from us, but my postdoc's about to be homeless. Can we get their third year of funding? And I'm out of money until the next fiscal year. I actually contacted a center and told them to take it out of the PI's funds at that point. I was like, they can go homeless, not a postdoc. like that's not okay to do to your postdoc. So when you're managing a grant, make sure you're actually managing it and you're taking care of the other people on your research award. Invite the program officer to your talk and poster, and make sure you invite them to your student or postdoc's talk or poster as well. This is a great opportunity for your students to get their start within their field. They may even get to know the program officer and become an executive secretary on a review panel, and then maybe one day they show up randomly at headquarters as a program officer and start working there. I got my start as an exec sec on an exobiology panel. That's when I realized, I was like, oh, I want to take over the world one day and work at NASA headquarters. Big hint, you do not get to take over the world at NASA headquarters. Yeah. And send program officers copies of your papers that come from funding. When you're not funded, if you must fire off that email to your program officer, questioning their intelligence and integrity, and that of the review panel, write it down and email it to just yourself. Walk away. Keep walking until you cool off. I don't care if it's 5 miles later. Have yourself a nice glass of wine maybe, or beer or soda, whatever is your thing to cope. For me, it is red wine. If you are on social media, throw your phone out a window. Sorry, don't literally throw your phone out a window. That's really aggressive. But don't go on social media and scream about how dumb the panelists are. I know someone who went on social media and wrote how terrible and how stupid their panel was. I did not know it occurred because I myself was staying off social media as a program officer at that point. I was like, there are things being written about me on there that I do not want to know. So I'm going to stay off for a few days. Instead, one of my panelists emailed me and said, so-and-so is writing these terrible things about the review panel. Perhaps you can contact them and let them know that one of their panelists has seen it and currently has their tenure track package in their hands. They did not get tenure that year. I'm not kidding. They got it the next year, but they did not get tenure that year. Don't do that to yourself. Especially if you're in a position that you're like up for tenure. Go scream into a pillow or walk to the end of a pier and scream into the ocean. Whatever it takes, but don't go on social media and do it there at that moment, because you could damage your career unintentionally. Remember that these programs are super competitive, and you have to submit multiple times in order to get funded. By the way, that person was funded later on various other programs. They're a really great researcher. They write good proposals. They just had a bad round. It happens to the best of us. After you receive your review, if there are questions, not within the first hour of receiving the review, but say after the weekend has gone by, arrange a debrief with the program officer to answer any of those questions that you have. And should there still be questions after that, and you're like, okay, I've talked with the program officer, it appears this was an unfair process, you can contest the review if you feel major mistakes were made. It can happen. I used to do appeals and debriefs all the time with Max, and it was pretty common. Max, would you say about 10% of the debriefs we had resulted in an appeal? Probably?
Yeah, a minority.
And some of them resulted in funding. So it can happen. But the debrief is not necessarily about appealing. It's about understanding what happened in the process and understanding what the next steps are, even if those next steps are try again. How do I improve this so that I actually will review better next year? So use the comments from the review panel and debrief to improve your proposal before submitting again. And serve on panels. Check for other funding opportunities is a piece of advice I always like to give when people are declined. There are a lot of people who will get declined because they haven't done a proof of concept or a pilot study on something that's high risk. So their type of research has basically never been done before. Maybe they're trying to use a new piece of equipment that the review panel just does not trust is going to be built in time. A lot of different groups out there like JPL or Goddard or Ames, they have internal awards that you can actually apply for funding to be able to do those pilot studies. So check to see if that funding is available to you. Likewise, there's a lot of professional programs out there like the L'Oreal Fellowships. Okay?
That's a big disadvantage to soft money institutes like SETI because we don't have a lot of internal funding. So how do we compete with that?
You check for other funding opportunities throughout. I can't change your internal funding model while I'm up here. I know it sucks, but that's the reality of soft money, There are things like L'Oreal Fellowships. I'm trying to think of some other ones in my head, but of course I draw a blank whenever I do something on the fly like this. There are other types of professional funding revenue outlets out there for small research funding for like pilot studies that you can look for. Yeah. Okay, so something that a lot of people ask me is, what do I do when I get stuck in the spiral of not being funded? How do I get myself out of a funk after getting rejected? So this next part that we're going to do, that we're going to finish up with, is combating negativity. Because when we started this process, we were thinking about our passion, about our research topic, right? And you just received a rejection notice. How do you rebound from that to remember what you're passionate about? How do you translate that level of decline into something that is useful for your team moving forward? So when you're combating negative thoughts within yourself, you should talk about the issue with someone you trust. You should ask your friends what they think of you. I'm not saying ask your colleagues. I'm not saying ask your boss. I'm saying ask somebody who's going to give you genuine feedback about you as a person. The panel evaluation you just got back is on the proposal. It is not you. It is on the proposal. So go back to remembering what you are great for. Use your own words to influence how you think. Build alliances. Own your accomplishment. And reorient yourself around your values. And Max, if you guys want to start handing out some of the stuff, we're going to be doing an activity soon. While they're handing out, so each one gets one sheet, 2 Post-it notes, and a Sharpie if they need it. While they're handing that out, I want to remind people, too, to combat negative thoughts within others, because your not just a PI, many of times you're the leader of an entire team as you're receiving this type of feedback. So number one, encourage the people around you. Discourage hostility and bickering. Gossip really is the death of a team. It really can be the number one hostile thing that makes a team stop working together. As a leader, show your own uncertainties and demonstrate your own learning process. Don't make it personal when someone's work needs improvement, and make sure to encourage the people in your group and reward them for mentoring others. Mentoring is not always listed as an evaluation criteria of a scientist, but I think if you're going to be the leader of a science team, a leader of a group of individuals, you have to be a good mentor. And it should be one of the main evaluation criteria for you moving forward. Okay, so we're going to do the values exercise. Everybody got a sheet of paper. Go ahead and look through, and for the first exercise, the exercise is simple. You have a group of words in front of you. You got a sheet, right? No. Oh, no, you're doing this. Yeah, everybody's doing this. Yeah. Raise your hand if you don't have one of the value sheets. Or stand. Got it? Also, you do not get to take my Sharpies with you. These are my tools for success. Okay, so exercise number one is very simple. Looking at the list of words in front of you, think of one of the moments in your life where you have been the proudest or the happiest. Any moment in your life where you've been super proud and happy. What are the values that come to mind? Don't write them down. You can stick dots beside them on the sheet of paper, but list them out to me as we go. So feel free to tell me some of those values that you see down there on that sheet that you think are important in your proudest moments, in your happiest moments. Confidence. Community. Helping others is a big one for me. Accomplishments, you said? Yep. Creativity. Inspiration. Knowledge. Serenity. Oh, I like it. It's okay if it's not a word on there, too. Happiness. Raise your hand if you have at least one word that you've highlighted as a value. All right, we've got most folks together. I'm going to give you 15 more seconds. And then I'm going to ask question number 2, which is on a scale of disagree to agree, how much on a daily basis do I try to live up to those words, those values that I'm highlighting? Don't say it out loud. It's for you to internalize. But how much do I look at those values that I said that are the things that came out of the happiest and proudest moments and utilize them on a daily basis? And maybe write a sentence saying, not on the Post-it notes, write a sentence thinking, why is this an important value to me? If you flip over the sheet, you'll see space. Swedish fish are the best. Right?
And it's this thing from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
Yeah.
takes you back.
All right, question number 3 while you're all writing. As a researcher, as a scientist, as a career person, what are the values that come to mind? You have a cheat sheet on the front. Feel free to list them off to me. Excellence. Accountability. Knowledge. Meaningful work. Mentorship. Creativity. Public service. Inspiration. Efficiency. Self-respect. Huh? Challenge. All right. Quick question. Were the words that we said in number 1 and the words that we said in number 3 the same? One was. Knowledge was. Why aren't they? So, I'm going to tell you an interesting fact that I told the folks at Ames when we did this yesterday. There. Every time I do this at a technical place, at a science-oriented place, they are not the same. Your values are different. Every time I do this at a diversity-related conference in STEM, the words are the same. 2 reasons why that might be happening. Number 1, in order to be successful scientists, we think that we have to have different values. Number 2, in order to survive in science as an underrepresented minority, you have to lean upon your values on a daily basis in order to survive. You all can reflect for a moment. So, while you're reflecting, I want you all to take your first post-it note. I want you to think of something that you wish somebody had said to you today as a compliment. You are blah, or in this case, I am blah. And I want you to write it down. So mine today is I am insightful and encouraging. Write yourself a post-it note. What is the thing you wish somebody had said to you today? That's not my computer. Just leave it for somebody else. All right. Now, because that one's hard, and not always does anybody get something, a lot of people here are, and I love the fact that I'm seeing that, I want you to write a compliment for someone else in the room. So look around the room, pick someone that you would like to write a compliment for, and write down your compliment.
I wonder if I might give you one today.
Okay.
Yesterday, she did this workshop yesterday, and then she gave one to me. I was so, I practically cried. It was so sweet. Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
So I wanted to give you one.
Okay, so we're going to practice how to give and take compliments
Oh
next.
yeah, and then she gave it to me, and I kind of stood there, and I just in stunned silence. She said, "Say thank you." Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so you go ahead and read it out loud.
Oh.
I'm going to turn
You
bright red.
are inspiring and nurturing.
Oh.
I love to watch you go.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Max.
it's just watching you do these.
Nurturing. That's probably the first time I've been called nurturing. I love it.
Really, but I mean,
Yeah.
you're helping people write proposals.
No, I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
You know.
I love it. Thank
Right,
you, Max.
right.
Oh. All right. After you get your compliment, go pass it off. Give and take compliments.
Literally pass it off?
Yeah. Literally pass it off, say what it says, and then say thank you. Oh, sorry. I keep moving. The poor... I'm so sorry. You're like, what is she doing? So I'm just...
Bouncing ball, which is fun.
Yeah. Yep. I hope you got me running around on camera. All right, good.
So that's Gauss, right?
That is Zizu.
That's it, okay.
Yeah. So Zizu, that you see up there on the screen, that is my cat that died right before I had to move from Washington, D.C. to Pasadena, California. Zizu was this cat that loved optics. So she's looking in a mirror, but what she's secretly looking at is light hitting my disco ball in the background and bouncing it over the entire room. But she would do this every single morning. And so instead of thinking, oh, the cat's liking the lights, I would think in my head, Zizu was giving herself her confidence booster to start her day. So she's got her chin up, she's looking in the mirror, she's like, you got this. You're amazing, you're smart, you are beautiful. Be the force today and get that red dot. And then she would eat her fancy feast and go take a nap. So do this. Be this person. Be the inspiration for the people around you. Now, when I judge poster sessions at conferences, I do the whole judging when I'm near them, and then once the group has left and the posters are still up, I will go back and leave a post-it note saying a compliment on something on their research and just be like, that was a rock star performance, you did such a great job. I'm really excited about blah, blah, blah with regards to your research. Check out these new results this person has. This is amazing. And it boosts the level of confidence of people who are presenting. You should be the one boosting the people around you, and you'll be amazed how much it boosts you. For me, I had a massive amount of imposter syndrome when I first started working at headquarters. And it took a long time for me to overcome that. You know, when you walk into a place and you're 20 years younger than everybody else, you're a woman, and you're the only contractor in that job, it's super intimidating, and there were some people who decided to be very nasty about that. And I had to learn these tactics to survive in that environment. As you all are dealing with hard times, as you're dealing with rejection and declination and tough moments for your teams, you want to make sure that you're encouraging and uplifting each other. So everybody close your eyes one more time. Think about your research. Your research should not just be a thing anymore. It should be people with faces. Think about that part of the science around you as you're a scientist. Go ahead and open back up your eyes. Remember these few lessons. Opportunities are there. Find them, learn them, make them yours. Follow the guidebook. Read the call. Your job is to make it as easy as possible for your two audiences to select your proposal. Who's your two audiences? Exactly, program officer, review panel. Think before writing, critique before submitting. It's never too early to start gaining proposal experience. It's also never too late. And networking is a critical part of your career, so get your name out there in positive ways. And most importantly, as you're going through this, remember your values. What is important to you? And with that, I thank you all. Questions?
Sorry, this is much less inspiring.
It's okay.
Small.
I always like to end on a good note. Yeah.
Yeah. So about relevance. So generally, you read the call, should be clear and so on. However, since reorg, there has been some big maxims that cut against each other in strict ways. Like no two programs can overlap. In relevance.
In planetary, yeah.
Yeah. So, but then that means that one program is defined by the other. So that's something to be careful. Like not just your program, you have to.
No, it's very difficult, and so I recommend talking to the program officer about the scope and making sure that the program officer is aware that your research fits within the scope. And if they're not aware, ask them where they think it might go, and then ask that next program officer and be in communication with everybody as it's happening. Yeah. Anything else? Please don't take my Sharpies.
Where's the Sharpie?
Yeah, sure.
I'm not sure it's a question or just a complaint, but I've been on review panels. One thing I can think of where sort of the panel was not following necessarily the guidelines, and the one example I can think of is soon after the budgets were redacted, there saying, well, these two people are proposing the same thing, but I know this person's more expensive or cheaper or whatever, you know, so therefore we should really.
Did you have a program officer in the room?
I don't think so.
I would always call that out to the program officer so that they can set the record straight on that that's not the job of the review panel. I'll admit that, like, when the first year that we started redacting the budgets, somebody complained to me in front of their entire panel. They're like, I can't actually say which ones are cheaper now and which ones aren't. I was like, you weren't supposed to be saying that for the last 10 years. I'm glad we finally fixed it. You know, like, so program officers probably think that the fix is a good thing that's made it better. And if people aren't following the criteria at hand, then we need to know that.
So I guess in general, like not just that specific, but in general, the program officers should be.
That's their job.
There.
Program officers are there to make sure that bias isn't coming into play and that people are treating everything consistent and fair and uniform. Kartik Sheth was at Ames with us yesterday, and he showed these codes of conduct, these rules for review panels that are utilized in astrophysics. And they're doing well. I think they're in their first year that they've been using them. But one of the things that I like that astrophysics does, that planetary is starting to apparently try to do, is make sure that there's enough program officers to where there can always be a program officer in the room. Because it's hard to find bias if you're not in the room. Yeah. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all so very much. Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yeah.